Hey everyone, and welcome to Slumber Reads. Tonight we have 2 hours of horror stories as per usual. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Liking the video helps out immensely, and it does only just take a quick second. Subscribing if you're new is also very much appreciated. We did just hit 138,000. I just want to say thank you. I've been here narrating stories for so many years at this point, and it just never gets old to me. And I really appreciate that there's still people that enjoy, new people coming in. I think all of that is really incredible. So just thank you to all of you, whether you're new here or if you've been here for a decade or whatever it may be. I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate it. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax. Enjoy the 2 hours of horror stories with no mid-roll ads, except for the ad break after this intro. There will not be any more ad breaks after that one. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. I've never been much of a gamer, but every now and then I get swept up by a game, and it consumes all of my time. Most of my friends are gamers, but I've never been a fan of the co-op games they like to play. They like their super competitive shooters and MOBAs, where I'm more of a friend slop type of guy. I'll play single player games from time to time, but I'm more likely to just doom scroll Instagram or Reddit while YouTube fills in the background noise. My computer collects dust for months at a time. I think I enjoyed building the thing more than actually using it, so I end up bed rotting most of the time staring at my phone. Recently, while doom scrolling Instagram, I got a follow request from my old high school friend Johnny. I got a pit in my stomach. I hadn't talked to him in years. I wasn't so sure I wanted to reconnect. We were the best of friends, but that time of my life was some of my lowest moments. I had no interest in digging all that back up. I mean, would it hurt to just follow him back? We'll probably just have a quick catching up chat, and probably go back to ignoring each other. I went ahead and approved the follow request while following him back. He sent me a message almost immediately. "Hey dude, how's it going?" "Yo, what's up? I'm good. You?" Same. "Hey, you still game?" "Yeah, from time to time." "You want to join my Discord group? I'm trying to put together some game nights." I'm not so sure about this. I don't know how I feel about just jumping in Discord calls with my old best friend. I mean, we're adults. I'm sure he would understand if I was unavailable most of the time due to being busy. "Yeah, sure. If it's on a day that I'm free, I can probably jump on." "Rad. Here's the link." I reluctantly clicked the link he sent and joined his Discord group. "Alright, I'm in." "Cool. I'll be in touch." "Sounds good." That wasn't too painful, but I'm sure we'll have to do the whole catching up thing if I ever do jump on a call with him. However, some time passed and I never heard anything new. This was somewhat of a relief. I'll be honest, I don't really use Discord. I'm a member of several groups, but I'm just not active in any of them, so I just have push notifications turned off on my phone. Recently, while talking to a coworker, the topic of games came up. "You on Discord?" he asked. "Yeah, you want to connect?" "Yeah, what's your username?" He pulled up his phone and opened Discord. I told him my username, and he searched it up. There, friend request sent. I then pulled out my phone and opened Discord. When I navigated to friend requests, I saw 2 of them. For now, I just accepted the one from my coworker. "All done," I said while turning off the screen and pocketing my phone. "Sweet. I'll let you know next time I'm on, and maybe we can play a match or 2. "Sounds good." Later on, I opened up Discord to see who the other friend request was from. The username was 6feet_4u. They were from the group that Johnny invited me to. What the hell? I went ahead and approved it. I also turned on push notifications just in case my coworker messaged me. About an hour later, I got a message from 6feet_4u. "Hey Ben, long time no see. It's Kate." My stomach dropped. This was the exact thing I was afraid of when Johnny first sent me that friend request. I didn't know he kept in touch with his ex-girlfriend. I could swear I remember them having the biggest fallout after graduation. I thought they hated each other. I guess they could be reconnecting after several years. I mean, that's probably pretty healthy. Hey Kate, how are you? Same old, same old. Oh yeah, Mr. Foster still giving you crap for your messy handwriting? LOL, yup, I think he's going to fail me. I keep telling you, he's willing to give out extra credit. I've missed you. Yeah, it's been a long time. Too long. I felt everything coming back. The mental pain, the physical anguish, the deep sadness. This was the last thing I ever wanted to happen in my life. I wish the past would just stay in the past. Hey, sorry to cut this short, but I need to clock into work. Oh, of course. We'll catch up later. Yeah, for sure. I dropped my phone on the floor to the side of my bed and rolled over. I cried for probably an hour. I moved on. Why are they doing this to me? I have a new life. I have a sense of purpose. The next day, while I was at work, I got another message from her. Hey. I left her on read and put my phone back in my pocket. She sent the same message a few days later, but I ignored it again. A few more days passed before she sent another. Wow, okay. I see how it is. A wave of guilt washed over me, so I finally replied. I'm sorry. I've been so busy lately, and I keep forgetting to respond. It's okay. I get it. I won't bother you. I don't know what to do. She doesn't deserve this, despite what I believed back then. She didn't do anything wrong. Sincerely, I'm sorry. We knew each other during a very difficult time in my life. I struggled with severe depression and really struggled day to day. You and Johnny popping back up into my life just brings it all back up to the surface. I didn't mean to hurt you. I'm just not sure I'm ready for all this. What do you mean by Johnny coming back into your life? I stared at her message for several moments. I have no idea what she's asking. I had no idea how to respond. Well, I didn't really keep in contact after high school. You know how it is. People grow apart. This was the best response I could think of. Do you mean me coming back into your life brought memories of Johnny? I was dumbfounded. What is she talking about? No. A few months ago I got a follow request out of nowhere from him on Instagram. I don't understand. What do you mean? Felt like she was gaslighting me. I was so confused. I don't know how else to say it. We connected over Instagram. We chatted a little bit before inviting me to the Discord group. Okay, fine. I get it. You don't want anything to do with me. You could have just said so. I can understand. But what you're doing right now is cruel beyond words. If you intended to make me cry, you did. I hope you're happy. I stared at this message for way too long, because she blocked me before I had a chance to respond. What is going on? I needed answers. I needed to message Johnny. There was one problem, though. I couldn't find his Instagram profile. I mean, that's not exactly unprecedented. I've had this happen before. Usually when someone's profile disappears overnight, it just turns out they deleted it. In fact, it happens all the time. Fine, I'll just message him on Discord. I just don't know what his username is. We never sent each other a friend request. I just joined his group. I navigated to the group and looked around. Since I don't really use Discord, I don't know all the ins and outs. Is there not a way to see all the members of a group? This is a lot harder than I thought it would be, so I just messaged the general chat. Hey Johnny, I don't know what your username is. Can you send me a friend request? It's Ben. Who's Johnny? He's the guy that invited me to this group. I don't think there's a Johnny in this group. No, there is. Like I said, he invited me to this group. Hey Ben, I think you're messaging the wrong group. I know that username. It's my coworker. I don't remember joining a group with him in it. I could have sworn this was the group Johnny invited me to. Oh, hey Philip. I must have gotten confused. My bad. All good, dude. Weird question, though. Is there someone in this group with the username 6 feet under for you? No. No. I don't think so. No. Okay, thanks. Never mind. What the hell? I'm so confused right now. Am I having the world's largest brain fart, or am I losing my mind? I spent the next couple hours searching up the username 6 feet under for you. I couldn't find anything. At some point I started wondering why I cared so much. The problem sorted itself out. I didn't want anything to do with them, and they were gone. I got my wish. I just felt a huge amount of guilt. I somehow really upset Kate, and I don't like hurting people. After a few weeks, everything went back to normal, and I forgot about it, at least until my mom messaged me on Facebook. Hey, just checking in. How's everything going? Hey Mom, everything's going well. How about you? Good, good. I was just going through old photos, and I came across a few with you and Johnny. Oh my god, it won't end. Even my mom won't let me keep it in the past. Oh yeah? Yeah, he was such a good kid, and you guys got along so well. I was typing out how we actually reconnected recently before she sent another message. It's such a shame about what happened. That's weird. I don't remember telling her about our falling out. As far as she knew, we just drifted apart. She sent another before I got the chance to respond. He had such a bright future ahead of him. I stared at that message for way too long. A deep anxiety arose from within me. How old would he be today? 37? Just a year younger than you, right? The memory of looking down at him lying in his casket returned to me. Mom, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot that I picked up a shift that starts in 10 minutes. I gotta go. Okay, hon. Be safe. I love you. Love you. I knew I had blocked out some memories from that time in my life, but I had no idea I blocked out something this big. How do you forget about something like that? The thing about deleting a social media account is that it's never really gone. If you change your mind, you can always have it reinstated. At this specific moment, I wish they could just stay deleted forever, because I'm looking at a message notification right now, one from an account that disappeared recently, and had just come back. It's exactly as the title of this post reads. My house is on the wrong side of the street. Well, I guess it was, but I'll get to that later. Yesterday I took my dog for a walk around the neighborhood. I always walked her around sunset, and the walk itself was only about a half an hour. However, this time as I walked down my street and the sky shone gold from the setting sun, something wasn't right. I've often heard that when you become familiar with a place, your brain subconsciously picks out things it remembers and things it doesn't. That is why sometimes seeing a familiar place from a new perspective makes it seem totally unfamiliar. My street? I hardly recognized it. Then I saw what it was. My house, which was always on the right side, was on the left side of the street. I approached my house and I actually did that thing they do in cartoons where they rub their eyes and then open them again as if that'll change anything. Well, nothing changed. To the left was my house, and to the right, where my house should have been, was an undeveloped lot. Although a sense of dread had overcome me, I felt myself moving forward slowly and mechanically. Eventually, I felt a tug. I looked over my shoulder to see that my dog, Callie, hadn't moved any closer, and that tug that I'd felt was from the leash reaching its max length. Callie began to growl as I tugged at the leash gently. Callie, it's okay. Let's go. But it wasn't okay, and so I ended up listening to Callie. Alright, let's get the hell out of here. And so we walked again. I don't know why, but I figured that maybe if we just did the walk again, something would change. My street is technically in a suburban area, but it's pretty forested, so while on my street, I can't see other streets. I'd always thought it nice, but as we walked down our street again, I started to have second thoughts. Damn. My house was still to the left and, in addition, the lights were all off. That wasn't how I'd left them. It seemed that my street, in general, was even more messed up the second time around. Pretty immediately my mind connected that maybe going for a second walk had actually ruined things further. I didn't know for sure, but I didn't try it again. This time I tried to make a call. I tried to make a call to my sister. Thankfully it rang, but unfortunately I never got an answer. I left a somewhat panicked voicemail asking if she was alright, and then tried my best friend. He didn't pick up either. I looked around. The entire rest of the street seemed normal beside being oddly quiet. I walked to the top of my driveway. Do I just go inside? Maybe I was the one acting strange. Has it always been this way? That seemed more likely than that my house had inexplicably moved. My dog barked. I jumped. Callie, you scared me. Callie was barking at the undeveloped lot that had replaced my house. She kept barking, and I stood frozen. I was trying to make out what it was she might have been barking at. Nothing. There was nothing. No movement, no sound. Just eerie silence. Callie began to whimper and cowered low to the ground. She began moving towards me, never taking her eyes off the lot. Screw it. I picked her up and quickly made my way onto my porch and then inside my house. Every light in my house was off, but I made good time turning them all on and locking every possible entrance into my house. Those moments in the darkness, just expecting something to be waiting in one of the dark corners, were the most confused, terrified moments of my life. However, nothing ever jumped out at me. My house was empty. Callie found a place to hide under my couch, and I sat at my kitchen counter contemplating my next move. I didn't feel the need to call the police. For some reason, I felt that it was possible that I was the one who had this all wrong. But then my phone rang. It was my sister. I picked it up and asked, "Hey, it's good to hear from you. I know this is going to sound crazy, but what side of the street is my house on? Like, when you're walking down it. You need to turn your lights back off." "What?" "Your lights. Turn them off." Her tone was flat, very matter of fact. It almost felt cold. I don't understand. In my peripheral vision, I watched something quickly drop out of my view of the kitchen window. I wasn't sure what I'd seen, or if I'd seen anything at all. I looked down at my phone, and the call had ended. What should I do? Was that even my sister? If not, maybe I shouldn't listen to her. I looked back to the window. I swore I'd seen something move away from it. Okay, I think I would turn my lights off. I moved towards my kitchen light switch, when underneath my feet I heard the creaking of footsteps. I stopped to listen. Creak. One single footstep, and then they stopped as well. It wasn't possible that someone was below me, because my house didn't have a basement, and also, the footsteps sounded as if someone was walking inverted to me, which definitely wasn't possible. 3 more creaks. The footsteps picked up again, this time quicker and more distinct. I followed the footsteps from the kitchen to the living room. Up until this point, nothing in my house had changed besides its location. The living room, however, all the furniture besides the couch and the wall decor had been cleared out. I must not have noticed in my scramble to get all of the lights back on. The floor was just bare hardwood except for a door in the center of the room. And no, this wasn't a trapdoor or some sort of hatch. It was a regular wooden door laying horizontal to the floor around it. I heard the footsteps walk right up to the door and I heard a knock. There was a moment of silence. Then another knock came, this time in a triplet. Callie, come on." But she wasn't coming out from under the couch. The door opened. I couldn't see where exactly the door opened into, but a light sniffle arose from it. Whatever was on the other side seemed to be crying. I backed out of the living room, slowly listening to every sniffle and sob that came from the door. Suddenly a leg, clothed in brown slacks and dress shoes, casually moved through the door frame. I immediately moved out of the living room and skulked up the stairs, trying not to make a sound. I remember whatever it was holding a briefcase. I remember watching the leg and subsequent body that followed adjust to the shift in gravity in a manner that almost resembled gliding. I made my way up the stairs and into my bedroom. I didn't hesitate. I quietly opened my bedroom window and calculated the damage I'd take from the fall. There was a knock on my bedroom door. Whatever it was moving quickly. I looked over my shoulder, a little lost for what to do. Then I heard the thing's triple knock, which previously had been the precursor to it just letting itself in. So I lowered myself out of my bedroom window and prepared to drop. As my bedroom left my view, I saw the hallway light shine in as the door opened. Once again I heard that crying. Moments before I let myself drop, I saw the start of a very tall man's head wearing a bowler hat, scraping along my bedroom ceiling. I didn't have much time to contemplate this though, as I soon made contact with the ground. Thankfully, I landed okay and the adrenaline got me to my feet. I made a break for the road and ran up it without looking back. "Callie, please stay under that couch." As I neared the top of the street, I caught a glimpse into one of my neighbor's houses. The front door was wide open, and hanging by a single hinge. The living room curtains were drawn and I could see blood splatter staining the wall in a morbid display. I picked up my pace again and made it off my street. However, I kept moving until I found a main road away from the street. It was then that I noticed that during all this, the sun had never fully set. In fact, it seemed that it hadn't moved at all. Eventually I found a gas station and sat out front for hours. It was just nice to be around people coming and going. I felt secure. After some time, my friend came and picked me up. I stayed at his house for the night. I was unsure of what to tell him, but he's a good guy and let me stay without needing a reason. I slept horribly, and after some painfully long hours, morning came. Around noon we drove over to my house. It was on the right side of the street, just like normal. I went inside cautiously. My friend must have thought I'd lost my mind. Callie was fine, but her leash was still on. I walked up the street and to my surprise, my neighbor's house was empty, a for sale sign in the front yard. There was no sign of him. That wasn't how I remembered it, and something inside me was scared to ask where he'd gone, or why he decided to sell. I'm writing all of this now to share my experience. I have no clue what happened to me last night. It feels like I imagined the whole thing, but I know I didn't. I haven't really known the best way to go on with my day, so I spent the rest of it driving around with Callie. Although as I'm writing this, I'm getting a call from my friend. It seems he sent me a text too. Let's see. It reads, "Yo, what I'm about to ask is going to seem crazy, but just please answer me anyway." My grandmother died 3 weeks ago. I found my grandmother's journal. The last 50 years were spent keeping the water babies quiet. My grandmother died on a Tuesday. By Friday, I was standing alone in her house overlooking the Snake River, wondering why she'd insisted I be the one to clean it out. She lived outside Massacre Rocks for over 60 years. The locals knew her as the old woman who carved toys out of driftwood and left them along the riverbank every month. People laughed about it. "She's feeding ghosts," they'd joke. She never corrected them. Growing up, I'd ask why she made so many little wooden horses, dolls, and boats. "They're gifts," she'd tell me. "For who?" She'd smile without looking at me. "For the children who never went home." I assumed she meant the old water babies legend every kid in Idaho grows up hearing. Supposedly, if you wandered too close to the river after dark, You'd hear children crying from the water. My grandmother took it more seriously than anyone else. She refused to let us whistle near the river. She never stayed out after sunset, and every month, without fail, she'd disappear for exactly 1 hour, carrying a basket of handmade toys. After she died, I found out why. I was moving her bedroom dresser when one of the floorboards shifted. Underneath was a narrow compartment, just large enough to hold a metal box. Inside were 24 leather journals. The first one was dated 1973. The last ended 3 days before she died. The first page read, "If you're reading this, then I'm gone. The toys in the shed must be taken to the river before the next new moon. If you fail, they'll begin crying again. Don't let them finish." I rolled my eyes. Old age does strange things to people. I almost threw the journal into the trash. Then I opened the second page. It wasn't stories, it was a list. January 1974, 3 wooden horses. No crying afterward. February 1974, 1 doll, 1 carved duck. The smallest one followed me halfway home. Ignored it. Everything stayed quiet. The entries continued like that for decades. Every month, every offering, every sound she'd heard, every mistake she'd survived. One line appeared over and over. Never answer when they know your name. I still didn't believe any of it until I found the shed. Hundreds of unfinished toys sat on shelves. Each was tagged with a month and year. The shelves suddenly stopped 6 weeks ago. The last tag read, July, Daniel, my name. I told myself she'd prepared it before she got sick. Nothing more. That evening I carried the journals onto the porch with a beer and started reading. Around sunset the birds stopped. Not gradually, all at once. The silence was so complete I could hear the river nearly half a mile away. Then came the crying. It sounded like a toddler. Soft, somewhere beyond the trees. I stood and listened. Another voice joined in. Then another. Within seconds, there were dozens. Children, crying together. I grabbed my flashlight and started toward the river before common sense caught up with me. By the time I reached the bank, the crying had stopped. The Snake River looked perfectly calm beneath the fading light. I laughed at myself. Then someone giggled. Right behind me, I spun around. Nobody. The beam of my flashlight caught only sagebrush and cottonwoods. Then a little girl's voice drifted across the water. Daniel. I froze. The journals slipped from under my arm. One landed open in the dirt. The page I saw made my stomach drop. They always say your name first. Something splashed. Not like a fish. Like someone stepping into shallow water. Another splash. Closer. Then another. I swept the flashlight over the river. Nothing. The voice came again. Daniel. This time it sounded impatient. I backed away without answering. The journals had another rule. If they call twice, leave. If they call 3 times, don't look in the water. My foot caught a rock. The flashlight flew from my hand. It landed facing the river. The beam illuminated dozens of tiny footprints leading out of the water. They weren't there a second earlier. Each footprint was no bigger than my palm. Wet, fresh, all leading toward me. The crying returned, except now it wasn't coming from the river. It surrounded me. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the flashlight's beam. I didn't wait for the third call. I ran. Branches slapped my face. The journals bounced against my chest. Behind me I heard dozens of tiny feet splashing through puddles that hadn't been there before. I slammed the front door and locked it. The crying stopped immediately. I didn't sleep. At sunrise, I convinced myself I'd imagined everything. Stress, grief, too much reading. I packed my car. Before leaving, I decided to burn the journals. As I carried them outside, something caught my eye. The basket my grandmother always used for the toys sat beside the porch. It hadn't been there yesterday. Inside was a single unfinished wooden horse. Tied around its neck was one of my grandmother's handwritten notes. It said only, "You answered." I read it 3 times before realizing something. I hadn't. I never spoke. Then I remembered. When I dropped my flashlight, when I saw the footprints, I whispered one word. "Oh." I didn't think that counted. Apparently, they did. I've been back home for 4 days now. Every night around sunset, I hear children crying somewhere outside my apartment. The neighbors don't seem to notice. Yesterday I found muddy footprints in my hallway. They're getting closer to my bedroom. I've started carving toys. I don't know why. I've never worked with wood before, but my hands seem to remember. Tonight, I finished the first horse. When I turned it over, there were words carved neatly into the bottom. Not in my handwriting. August. 1 horse. Too late. As a born and raised Iowan, I'm no stranger to tornadoes. Most Midwesterners are accustomed to tornado season. It's just a fact of life here. We tend to be pretty blase about tornadoes since we're so accustomed to experiencing multiple tornado warnings every spring and summer. Yet it's exceedingly rare to actually see a tornado in person, let alone have one strike your home. That being said, I'm one of the unlucky few. The year was 1994, and I was an obnoxious college freshman at a small private university, about 2 hours from my hometown. Close enough to feel familiar, yet far enough to feel new. It was the second semester, and I had just moved out of the cramped dorms and into a shabby, yet surprisingly spacious 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of town, with my new roommate, Muyo. Muyo and his parents were Bosnian refugees who had relocated to Iowa the previous year to escape the Bosnian War. Muyo's father was a doctor, and his mother a teacher, and they were brilliant people. But since neither of their licenses were valid in the US, they found work where they could, in one of the many meatpacking plants. Muyo was a pre-med student, following in his father's footsteps, with a brain to match. Not gonna lie, I was jealous of his work ethic. 2 semesters in, and my major was still undeclared. I was less concerned about figuring out what I was going to do with my life than I was with beating Mortal Kombat and finding upperclassmen to buy booze for me. I was a bit nervous moving in with Muyo, coming from small-town Iowa and not knowing a thing about Bosnia or its culture, but Muyo and I were fast friends. The catalyst being our shared love of video games. Back home, all Muyo had was a knockoff NES called a Pegasus. He was enamored with my SNES, and I was more than happy to show him the ropes. When he wasn't studying and I wasn't partying, we'd spend our free time combing through flea markets for discount games. I helped him practice his English in exchange for him helping me with my chemistry lab reports. Doing them for me, and his mom was always bringing over homemade burek. I helped loosen him up, and he helped keep me accountable. Overall, it was a great arrangement for both of us. It was a typical Friday in late April, a bit chilly with a pleasantly warm breeze. I generally don't keep a close eye on the weather, but I do recall seeing on the local news that there was a moderate risk of severe thunderstorms that evening, including the possibility of tornadoes. It was a pretty typical day of classes, one that wasn't especially memorable. I overheard chatter about the incoming storm, but mostly in the context of classmates debating whether they should hit the bars after class or stay in. No one seemed especially worried about the threat of severe weather, just trying to plan around it. 'Twas the Midwestern way. Muyo's final class ended an hour before mine, so it was no surprise that he had beaten me home. Muyo gazed out the living room window at the sky. The soft jazz of the Weather Channel emanated from the TV. I glanced at the screen as I sat my bag down. Severe thunderstorm watch until 2 a.m. Tonight, thunderstorms. Some possibly severe with tornadoes. Lows in the upper 40s. Chance of rain, 90%. It's probably going to be a bust. I said before taking in a deep breath and blowing methodically into our copy of Super Mario Kart before sliding it into the console. No one else seems all that worried about it. Prepare for the worst, hope for the best, Muyo grunted, plopping down onto the couch beside me. We played a few rounds, ordered a pizza for dinner, and eventually made our way to our own rooms. By 9:30, there was a light drizzle outside, and the sound quickly lulled me to sleep. It felt like I had just fallen asleep when a loud crack of thunder made me shoot up in bed. As my eyes peeled open, I was flashbanged by a brilliant bolt of lightning, followed by another immediate crack of thunder that shook the house. I groggily sat up, peeking through the blinds out the window behind my bed. Outside, the wind raged, the trees surrounding the house bending and buckling as the rain seemed to fall sideways, blown by the gusts. There were no streetlights this far outside of town, but the strobe-like lightning illuminated my view. I tried to turn on my bedside lamp to glance at the clock, only to be met with darkness. Crap, I thought. Power must be out. Almost immediately, a low drone was audible beneath the cacophony, which quickly grew in pitch and volume, a discordant, wailing moan. The tornado sirens were going off. As soon as I sat up and prepared to get Muyo, I heard a frantic knock on my door. Before I could respond, the door swung open, revealing a pale, trembling Muyo, flashlight in hand. I could see tears welling up in his eyes as he stammered. Whoa, 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 what's going on, man? I asked, putting my hand on his shoulder. It's okay, it's just the sirens. Sirens. Something so ubiquitous, with severe weather to me. But to Muyo, they meant something different. My heart dropped when I realized why he was so distraught. Hey, I said, not really sure how to handle the situation. It's alright, you're safe. We're safe. Muyo buried his face in his hands, choking back a quiet sob before nodding slowly. Christ, the stuff this guy must have gone through. It's just a tornado warning. It doesn't mean there's actually a tornado, just that there could be one. Muyo tensed, his voice agitated and panicked. Sirens don't sound for no reason. I couldn't help but flinch slightly, startled by the sudden outburst. It was clear that Muyo was deeply troubled by the situation, and I honestly couldn't blame him. Muyo took a deep breath, his gaze locked to the floor. Sorry, I didn't... Nah, man, you're good. Let's head down to the basement. I pulled the top blanket off my bed, slinging it over my shoulder. I reached into the nightstand drawer and grabbed my hand crank weather radio. With the power out, it was our only way to know what was going on out there. I kept my hand on Muyo's shoulder, sort of pushing him along as we crossed the house. As we descended the basement stairs, the sirens became more and more muffled, and Muyo seemed to relax a bit. The basement was small and unfinished, grimy, dusty, and spattered with spider webs. The boiler was stationed at the center of the basement, and besides the circuit breaker, was the only thing in the room. We seldom went down into the basement, pretty much just on the rare occasion that we needed to flip the circuit breaker. I spread the blanket across the floor in front of the boiler, giving us a more comfortable place to sit. Muyo propped the flashlight against the boiler and began to turn the radio crank. The radio slowly came to life as Muyo fiddled with the dial, scanning for an audible station. Baseball-sized hail and damaging wind gusts exceeding 75 miles per hour across the region. Radar indicates... The National Weather Service has issued a tornado warning for... The robotic voice proceeded to slowly list multiple counties, including ours. In Iowa, until 3:45 a.m. At 2:37 a.m., a severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado was located east of our town. Take cover now. Move to an interior room on the lowest floor of a sturdy building. Avoid windows. If in a mobile unit, a vehicle, or outdoors, move to the closest substantial shelter and protect yourself from flying debris. If no shelter is available, lie flat in the nearest ditch or other low spot. Doppler radar has indicated this storm may contain Pa told us all to go inside. The size of baseballs or larger. Take cover now. There was no pause or change in cadence or tone when the voice deviated from the script. As the local weather broadcast resumed, Muyo and I exchanged confused glances. Pa told us all to go inside? Muyo slowly repeated. What do they mean by that? I shrugged. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. It was probably a mistake. I suggested. Maybe someone at the station hit the wrong button. Muyo didn't seem satisfied, but slowly nodded. We continued listening to the local weather reporter as she detailed the storm heading towards us. Wind gusts of up to 60 miles per hour may cause... Another one? I scoffed. Christ, that was fast. As the robotic voice began its spiel, I quickly realized that the message was identical to the one that had been broadcast a few minutes ago. At 2:37 a.m., a severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado was located. The sky was green. The roosters were crowing. Cover now. Move to an interior room on the lowest floor of a sturdy building. Avoid windows. If in a mobile home, a vehicle, or outdoors, move to the closest substantial shelter and protect yourself from flying debris. If no shelter is available, lie flat in the nearest ditch or other low spot. Doppler radar has indicated this storm may contain destructive hail the size of baseballs or larger. Take cover now. The voice interrupted itself, then continued without missing a beat. Something's wrong, Muyo muttered. Should we call the station? I think they've got their hands full right now, I said dismissively, trying to mask my own sense of unease. I bet the signal's jumbled or something. I don't know how it works. Probably best not to leave the basement now anyways, Muyo observed, clearly a bit dissatisfied but preoccupied with listening intently to the broadcast as the storm intensified. The wind howled outside, punctuated by crashes of thunder. Based on what the weather report was saying, the worst of the storm had reached us. We were in the middle of it now. I stared at the concrete wall, aimlessly tracing shapes with my finger on the blanket as the reporter discussed the wind speeds occurring in various communities. It sounded as though our town was in the lead. Muyo remained tense, slowly nodding as though he were chewing and digesting every spoken word. Meanwhile, just a few miles south, we've received reports of wind gusts reaching... And then it made a lot of loud sounds, and a loud beep sound. What the hell? I exclaimed with half a laugh. What is it this time? Same as before. Severe thunderstorm, take cover, yada yada. If no shelter is available, lie flat in the nearest ditch or other low spot. Doppler radar. Ma put me in the cellar. She said I had to pray. I prayed we'd be safe. Destructive hail the size of baseballs or larger. Take cover now. The look of discomfort on Muyo's face echoed my own feelings. Is someone pranking us or something? I said with a chuckle that hardly masked my nervousness. What's the joke? Muyo challenged, and I had no response. The broadcast resumed, muffled by the sounds of hail pelting the roof. Radar indicated Hook Echo just east of... And then more beeping sounds. Ugh, I rolled my eyes, dramatically flopping onto my back. Can they please stop with that tone? In all honesty, I was thoroughly unsettled and confused. Why did they keep interrupting the broadcast with the same alert message? And why was the narrator interjecting random statements? I almost had to laugh it off to keep myself from getting freaked out. If in a mobile home, a vehicle, or outdoors, move to the closest substantial shelter. The chickens were screaming. Ma was crying. The wind smelled like dirt and metal. Lie flat in the nearest ditch or other low spot. Doppler radar has indicated this storm may contain destructive hail the size of baseballs or larger. Take cover now. I felt a chill run down my spine. As the storm intensified outside, the sirens began to sound once more. I looked at Muya and saw him swallow hard, his eyes fixated on the wall. It's just a storm, I reminded him, keeping my voice soft and low. And by the sound of it, the worst is almost past. Then we can get back to bed. With a slight smile, I quipped, if any of my professors count me absent tomorrow, I'm suing. I need my beauty sleep. The corner of Muyo's lip curved slightly, but I could tell that he was troubled. Troubled by the sirens, troubled by the storm, troubled by the odd emergency alerts. He knew something was wrong, and I think I did too. I was just too scared to accept it. Surely it was just a station error. Surely. Do you think there's actually going to be a tornado? Muyo asked. Statistically, nah. Personally, he glanced at me. I smirked. No. More beeping noises. Speak of the devil. The National Weather Service has issued a tour. It all went quiet again. I knew God would help. I ran outside to tell Ma and Pa. Take cover now. It was only a few minutes later when the sirens finally stopped. The thunder no longer shook the house, and the hail had slowed to a lazy, rhythmic thudding. The reporter announced that all tornado warnings had expired, and the broadcast promptly came to a close as pre-recorded talk show segments began to play. It was almost 4 in the morning, and despite the fact that I was definitely going to be using this as an excuse to skip class, I was eager to get back to bed. The instant I stood up, the radio blared. More beeping noises. What the... After the long tone, there was silence. Nothing but faint static for around 10 seconds. Then the voice spoke. I saw Ma sleeping in the old oak tree. Her dress was tangled on a branch. One of her shoes was higher up than she was. The chickens were spread across 3 fields. I thought somebody had taken them apart. I found Pa in the cornfield. I knew it was him because of his suspenders. He wasn't put together right anymore. The wind started to howl again. I tried to carry Pa to the cellar, but he was too heavy. I was too slow. Take cover now. At this point, I was over it. I turned the radio off and motioned for Muyo to stand. Come on, I said, picking up the blanket and shaking off the dust. Let's go back upstairs. We're good now. Wait, Muyo interjected. If it's saying take cover, shouldn't we... Take cover from what? It's over. Thing is just glitching or something. Muyo opened his mouth slightly as though he wanted to say something. I spoke for him. Look, I don't know what kind of pretentious art project that was, but I'm not going to sit here and listen to slam poetry at 4 a.m. Let's go. But it doesn't make sense. Exactly. My mind was swarming with questions, and surely so was Muyo's. But I was too tired to question anything, too tired to care. I tucked the radio into my hoodie pocket and started up the stairs. Take cover now. I stumbled, barely catching myself. What the hell? I pulled out the radio and checked to make sure I had turned it off. And sure enough, I had. Any sense of unease I had been feeling was now overtaken by annoyance. You know, I'm just gonna leave it down here, I said less than graciously, tossing the radio onto the concrete floor. The plastic casing cracked on impact. I couldn't care less. I was going to bed as soon as my foot hit the first step. Take cover now. Take cover now. Take cover now. Take cover. At this point, I screamed in frustration, banging my fist on the wooden banister. Jesus Christ, can you shut up? Muyo grabbed my shoulder hard, snapping me out of my rage. I spun around and his eyes were wide. Shh, listen. The radio stopped, and as my ears acclimated to the silence, I could make out a faint, distant sound, like a car driving up the road. No, more like a semi. Actually, as the sound grew louder, it was distinctly recognizable as the sound of a train. My heart stopped as Muyo and I exchanged a look of horror. Take cover now. I barely remember what happened next. Adrenaline took over. I remember Muyo and I huddling beneath the stairs, throwing the blanket over ourselves and shrinking as small as we could. What was once a faint rumbling was now becoming an unbearably loud roar. I felt a sharp pain in my head as my ears popped. For a brief moment there was deafening silence, followed by a cacophony of shattering glass, splintering wood, warping metal. I felt my brain rattling against my skull. My flesh pulled taut as the wind tried to rip it from my bones. And then, merciful nothingness. The house had endured a direct hit from the tornado. All that was left was a pile of rubble, obscuring a miraculously pristine basement. I believe 2 or 3 other homes endured minor damage, but thankfully no other parties were injured. And as miserable as the recovery was, my body was effectively one giant bruise. Muyo and I both got off about as easily as someone hit directly by a tornado could hope for. If I hadn't listened to Muyo, I wouldn't be alive to tell this story. But more perplexingly, neither of us would be alive if we had not heeded the mysterious warning. Over 30 years later, I find myself hunkered down in my basement with my wife and month-old daughter as the sirens blare outside. She gently rocks and hushes the baby as I shoot out a quick text. Yo, Doc, you in your safe place? An almost instantaneous response. LOL, Rich coming from you. Yeah, we're in the basement. Tell the baby I said hi. I chuckle, leaning over to kiss my daughter's forehead. The sirens don't last long, leaving only the soft rumbling of thunder in the distance and the rhythmic tapping of raindrops hitting the roof. It's rather cozy. Think we're good to head upstairs, babe? Looks like we're in the all clear. My wife holds up her phone with the weather radar app open to show me, and the silence is broken by the harsh screech of an incoming emergency alert. Our daughter startles awake and begins crying as we fumble with our phones to silence the blaring. As my wife shushes the baby, I glance down at the screen. Emergency alert. National Weather Service. Tornado warning in this area until 8:30 p.m. CST. Take shelter now in a basement or an interior room on the lowest floor of a sturdy building. If you are outdoors in a mobile home or in a vehicle, move to the closest substantial shelter and protect yourself from flying debris. I sat in the basement with my wife and month-old daughter. I already knew what came next. Can I tell you my biggest fear? It's sort of a silly one, and I've never really heard anyone else talk about it. But I'm terrified of being predictable. When I was in kindergarten, we learned what the word meant in this huge picture book full of big words. My teacher would tell us a story from the book, have us guess a few words, then give us the answer. And it had been fun for the first few words. The ones I can remember being these cute animals, baking for the word decadent, this lizard learning the word humid, stuff like that. The word predictable had this story attached. Of course, paraphrased, my memory isn't that good. Every day, a man wakes up in the same house, puts on the same clothes, and eats the same breakfast. He gets into the same car he's always had, goes to the same job he's always worked, drives home on the same route, then goes to bed to have the same day all over again. Pretty depressing for kindergarten, right? I can vividly recall what the guy looked like in the book. This pale man slumped into a purple couch, bored eyes looking forward at nothing. I remember thinking he looked like he was melting. When I looked at my folder that night, I watched the plastic crinkle over my math homework and thought of the homework I had done last night, of all the homework I had done for the past year. Subsequently, I burst into tears. When my mother had walked over and asked what was wrong, I blubbered. My life is so predictable. So, with that in mind, you could see how being stuck in a time loop is my personal hell. I've been stuck in May 11th, 2026 for a while. I want to say a few months now. I'm not the best at keeping track of time. I've tried the usual tactics for escape, like staying up all night. Hasn't worked. Day stays the same when it hits 12. Offing myself. I just wake back up on the same day, giving a beautiful monologue admitting my faults. Only worked for the dude in Groundhog Day. Stuff like that. I'm not even sure this post will last a full day, since everything always resets. So yeah, being stuck wouldn't have been too bad, even with my fear of monotony. I mean, there are some pros, like eating as much as I want without gaining any weight, or having all the time in the world to do what I like. But if that were the case, I think it would have taken me way longer to finally sit down and write this out. No, that isn't why I'm writing. I'm writing because I got even more stuck. It happened while I was having brunch with one of my friends. It was spontaneous, since there isn't really any planning ahead for me. I was listening to her tell me about the salon she works at when the idea first entered my head. What if I told her? Miraculously, I hadn't tried to tell anyone yet. I guess coping with the embarrassment of someone not believing me was worse than repeating the same day over and over. Odette, I began, trying to find the words. Can I tell you something crazy? Crazier than the salon? I fidget with my straw. I'd say so. She shrugs, taking a bite out of a scone, and I take it as a go-ahead. I think I'm stuck in a time loop. It feels really, really cringy to say, even if I am being genuine. Odette, however, just rolls her eyes. How very cliché of you. I'm being serious. A few people turn to look our way. I've lived today a bunch of times. I don't know what to do about it. I mean, I've tried almost everything. I watch her eyebrows furrow, and I silently hope she won't ask me to tell her what's going to happen next, since despite living today a million times, I haven't repeated brunch with her yet. But she never asks anything. In fact, her face seems stuck in the same expression, a slight frown tugging at her features. Hello, Odette? I wave my hand in front of her face, hoping that she was yanking my chain or something, but she doesn't move. Aside from her expression, when I turn my head to look at the other tables, I realize that the restaurant ambiance sounds awful. Just a cacophony of a few words being repeated. The same forks hitting the plates at the same time. A baby crying in the same pitch and tone repeatedly. For a few minutes, all I do is sit. I get up, and Odette doesn't say anything, her eyebrows furrowing again. I don't bother making an excuse for myself. Stepping onto the street, it sounds worse. Louder than it did in the restaurant. I pick my way across the street, avoiding the cars as they drove forward a few inches, then returned to the same spot. I was stuck in the same minute. You know, the same day on loop isn't as bad as they tell you it is. I mean, sure, there are downsides, but as long as you fill your days with activity, and you don't mind being alone, it isn't all bad. You can still talk to people then. You still get your sunsets and sunrises. You still have the nights to sleep in. You still remember what silence is. The same minute is hell. I'm surprised I haven't lost my mind yet, hearing the same noises over and over again. But even still, being stuck in the same minute isn't what inspired me to write this post. About 7 hours ago, I was still walking around trying to tune out the noise enough to think. About 7 hours ago, I bumped into someone on the street. I apologized without thinking, and they did too. Then kept on walking. It was only after I was a few feet away that it dawned on me that I bumped into someone. I turned to watch them walk away, only to find that they had stopped too, their backs still turned to me. I ran all the way home. I didn't stick around to find out if they were friendly or not. I'm sitting at my computer now. It's a miracle that my computer is letting me type. An even bigger miracle that I've been focused enough to actually write. I just want to know if anybody else is experiencing this. It'd be a little comfort to know I'm not alone. Please feel free to reach out. I promise. If you are, I'll talk. I have all the time in the world. Reddit won't let me update this draft. It just keeps loading, loading, loading. God, I hope this posts. It was supposed to be a perfectly normal family outing. My mom, my dad, my sister, my baby brother, and me. We were a middle-class family living in southern Manchester in the 90s, in a classic suburban home in the Heatons. I stayed with my parents and siblings, never really moving out of the house or neighborhood while living with them. Usually my mother woke my sister and me for school. We'd get breakfast and walk to the nearest school district we were enrolled in. The routine was normal. Wake, eat, school, and home. Seldom would we get out as a family to a shopping center, or the piers, where we'd have a relatively good meal of either fried food, fast food, street food, or mom would just propose to cook at home, to all of our dismay. But on one spring evening in February, my dad came home with a big grin. The man rushed to my mother, who was cooking in the kitchen with Troy sitting on a high chair, devouring colored blocks bigger than his mouth. We won the free dinner," Dad said. "Oh my God, how's that possible?" Dad shrugged. He chuckled to himself before shoving an envelope into Mom's hands. "I don't know either. I called them earlier and they asked me a bunch of questions about our food preferences. He had a lot of questions about allergens, but I reassured him nobody was sensitive to anything." This is great news. Orago is extremely exclusive. I hear those snooty shallots in the Revlon counter constantly talking about months-long bookings. Mom held the letter, reading the print on the page, as I tried to keep my attention solely focused on my homework on the dining table. Her grin faltered slightly as she read deeper into the print. "Oh, dinner is scheduled in April." Her smile was plastered back on as she looked up at Dad before continuing to cook. I had practically forgotten about that whole conversation until April of that year, when I got home from school disheveled from playing soccer with my schoolmates. Mom wasn't pleased, saying I should have gone home earlier and cleaner, before telling me to get into the bath and wear the outfit on my bed she picked out. "Alan, to the bath, now." Her voice lingered. The outfit looked brand new, or I just never wore it enough to notice, as vests weren't really my thing even then, especially when I wore them over a shirt and under a coat. Time practically moved faster than it usually did when your family is in a frenzy, until we found ourselves in Dad's car, on the way to spinning fields. That part of the city looked mesmerizing from inside the car. We only ever passed by only to get to another point before, but to really see the tall skyscrapers and commercial buildings in its peak bustling hour feels different when you knew the destination was exactly there. "You'd better be on your best behavior when we get there," Mom said. Claire sank into her seat, unhappy with how she looked in her frilly emerald dress. "Tell that to Ivan." "I only fight back when you start it," I retorted, leading to Mom having to tell us both off while Troy sat happily in his car seat in a small but adorable suit. The car stopped in front of the garden-like driveway, where men in velvet blue uniforms waited by a golden revolving door near high-paned windows. After Dad handed the keys and claimed a ticket from the valets, we were led by an escort up to the restaurant, where my sister and I ogled at the entrance. You could see the giant aquarium from the outside, while the nearby wall lit up with the establishment's name and logo, Orago's. A waitress let us in after the maitre d' had a brief exchange with my dad. Claire looked just as mesmerized at the restaurant as I was, never having seen anything like it before. We were used to the yellow and red, ketchup and mustard type of interior from fast food places. To see a fancy restaurant was a brand new experience for us. She led us to a darker spot in the restaurant, which had a Japanese screen keeping privacy between the tables. Our area had 5 seats and a high chair surrounding a round table, topped with a tablecloth that had one too many layers forming swags around the table. I rushed to sit near the window, seeing the entirety of London's skyline from the view. Claire was mad she didn't get to it first, but couldn't do much about it. First come, first served. She knew the rules. Please get comfortable. I will be back with refreshments and your food cards, the waitress said. Mom was seated beside Dad, while Claire was seated beside me, and Troy was seated in the provided high chair beside Mom. Mom waited for the waitress to be fully gone before pulling out a digital camera to start taking photos of everyone and everything around her. Meredith is going to fume seeing these photos, she said, jeering behind the camera. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Dad mumbled to himself. Honey, what are you doing? There are 5 seats. Yeah, because there are 5 of us, Mom chortled. No, I already told them Troy needed a high chair instead. Well, this table was probably made for 5. Dad shrugged, letting Mom's words brush off his thoughts as we all waited patiently for the waitress to come back. She did, not long after, with a cart full of drinks and menus. She asked Claire and me if we wanted sodas or juice. I had a Coke, while she had sparkling apple juice. She gave Troy his own small cup of orange juice. She turned to Mom and Dad, asking which they preferred. We'll have the red, Dad said, as Mom nodded. The waitress spoke a bunch of wine jargon, talking about how old the wine was before uncorking the bottle in front of us, causing Claire to jolt. That's scary. I don't think I like wine, she said. More for me and Troy. She made a disgusted expression as the waitress began to fill the wine glasses on the table with wine. First Mom's, then Dad's, then the third wine glass by the vacant seat. My parents paused, the drink barely touching their lips as they looked at her. Sweetie, who's... My mom chuckled before putting the drink down. Who is that supposed to be for? The waitress glanced at them. Her polite eyes hadn't wavered. Your guest, of course, she said, smiling before walking away with the beverage cart. Mom and Dad stared at the extra wine glass. I'll drink it, Mom said, brushing off the tension with an outstretched hand. No, just leave it there, Dad said. Claire was too engrossed in the menu, reading the names off the food card, while Troy suckled on the sippy cup full of orange juice. Claire. I held my sister's arm as she brushed me off, annoyed. What? Did you put the juice in his bottle? I asked. What are you talking about? She paused as we both watched our baby brother, not noticing the fallen plastic cup that was once filled with orange juice roll under the table. What on earth did you two do? Mom said, seeing Troy's baby bottle full of orange juice. It wasn't me, we said in unison. Why would you do this? Who did this? Mom took Troy's orange bottle as he began crying. The table was a bustling cacophony of familiar exchange. For a moment, we forgot we were in a fine dining establishment. Mom was scolding us. Troy was sobbing loudly. Dad drank Mom's wine, while Claire and I tried to convince her we were innocent. Enough, she snapped, silencing Claire and me. Mom took Troy from his chair to calm him from crying, but even within her arms, he bawled, until she paced, walking around the table, whispering pleas for him to quiet down before we got kicked out of the establishment. People were beginning to stare. Their darkened eyes glared at our table, before whispering to themselves, and the empty seats beside them. Dad sighed, taking another sip from Mom's glass. I furrowed my brows. All of the tables had one empty seat, one singular seat that no one occupied. Troy stopped crying as Mom walked near the empty seat at our table. He laughed, his small hands motioning at the sixth seat. Mom was too relieved to even notice how odd the baby reacted as she sat him back down on the high chair to rest her feet. Troy didn't take his gaze away from the empty seat, clapping and laughing while kicking his feet. "You drank all my wine?" Mom said, looking exasperated at Dad as her glass sat empty beside her plate. "Yeah, there's another glass right there anyway." He paused. The third glass was empty too. "You drank the other one too?" Mom said, trying too hard not to raise her voice. But Dad couldn't muster up a response to even defend himself as he looked at the third empty glass. No, I didn't," he said, barely forming a coherent sentence. Mom sighed. "You'd better pray that girl brings back the whole bottle." The waitress returned, but not with the bottle. She carted in a whole bonsai tree in a tray before placing it in the middle of the table. The tree had small pockets of food dangling from the branches. Each of us tried it, taking a bite of the round, bubble-sealed food. It was fun. I wasn't sure what to make of it, actually. The shell felt like a thin layer of sensitive plastic, and as I popped it into my mouth, a burst of flavor coated my tongue. Floral, yet savory and sweet at the same time. Claire said hers tasted like lavender mint. "So like laundry soap. You're eating soapy sacks, sis?" I asked, barely containing my laugh as she shoved me. The appetizers arrived one after another, each more ridiculous than the last. I couldn't understand why anyone would pay so much money for food that looked like science experiments, but every time I reluctantly tried the food, it somehow tasted exactly like something familiar. From peeled onions resembling a tapeworm on the plate, drizzled in olive oil and breadcrumbs, to deconstructed burgers. Each component of a burger is turned into a ball before being pierced with a stick. The nugget was the strangest so far. The appetizer was a barely formed duck embryo, housed inside thin, crispy strings forming a nest, blanketed on a toasted wonton skin. Its eyes were pitch black, and from what you could make out was the head still barely separating from the rest of its body. Claire looked as though she was about to burst into tears when I turned to her. She looked at the duck embryo with pity. I can't eat this," she mumbled. Mom looked perplexed before Dad spoke. "It's good to try new things, Claire. You can't appreciate what you don't discover." Dad ate a whole nest as Claire looked mortified. "Dad, don't eat it." "Honey, I think we should just return this. It doesn't look appetizing," Mom said. "Nonsense. It's fine, I'll eat it." Dad practically finished the whole plate as we watched him eat all 8 nests. The 3 of us sat in silence watching him eat, before he gulped down the whole glass of water in one breath. Troy didn't understand what was happening on the table, and quite frankly, we didn't either, although he was more particularly occupied by the empty seat opposite to him. The empty plate with untouched utensils looked proper, ready, waiting. Troy giggled again, kicking his feet under the table as the waitress came back. She took the used plates before setting down 6 different plates. Claire and I let out a sigh of relief, realizing the food finally looked normal. Mom had what looked like chicken Alfredo. Claire's plate was a plate of lasagna. Troy had a bowl of tepid mushroom soup, and mine was a classic spaghetti with a palm-sized meatball on the top. Dad had a plate of what looked like steak and potatoes. The potatoes looked mashed with gravy sauce on top, but the meat looked red. "Richard, that's too undercooked. We need to return." Mom paused as she watched Dad eat the undercooked steak. It bordered between rare and raw, as each slice he took to put into his mouth juiced with red liquid. Too sheer to be blood, but too red to be water. He happily ate his meal, pairing it occasionally with the mashed potatoes before turning to us. "Go on, it'll get cold." He gestured at our food before we too took bites of our own meals. Mom occupied herself with her food, slightly shifting in her seat to move away from Dad, while Claire helped Troy eat his soup, taking bites off of her own meal occasionally. I ate my own meal as well, though I was better off eating nothing at all, as my taste buds barely registered the food. My mind was occupied with the sixth plate between Dad and me. My fork balanced the giant ball of beef, as my eyes trailed towards the curling heat steaming from the plate a few feet away. The dish looked like a plump pouch of sheer flesh, resting on top of an orange sauce. I jolted back slightly, seeing a seam tear open, a clean, straight slice, before small intestines began to pool out along with a soup of thick cream liquid. I checked the food card I set aside, and right on the main course category, my eyes settled on the Babe, a pound of steamed, milk-fed baby goat intestines, cooked with mushroom raw, wrapped within the goat mother's flavorful rumen, served with the in-house citrus sauce. Mom? I muttered under my breath. I wasn't sure if my mother heard me the first time, as I was about to call attention to the sixth plate, but the meatball on my fork finally slipped off as it rolled down onto the floor. A wet slap hit the ground before the sphere disappeared beneath the table. I felt a heated glare against the skin of my nape. When I turned, I saw Dad's eyes towards me, blank, empty as his mouth opened to speak. I caught a glimpse of his bloody teeth, the once white teeth he meticulously maintained, and encouraged Claire and I to do the same. The man who emphasized on the importance of hygiene was a far cry to what I was seeing now. "Put it back on your plate. It's rude to make a mess," Dad said. The red juices from his meal lined the edges of his mouth. I got off my chair reluctantly. Before getting to my knees, lifting the layers of tablecloth, I was met with a darkness bordering on pitch black. I squinted, trying to make out where the ball of meat could have been until I was staring right at it. In front of my face was the meatball clasped within an outstretched hand towards me. My throat practically clamped shut as my breathing halted, my own hand uncurled by itself right under it. As it handed it to me, my eyes never left the dark. It never left the sight of the aged, grayish-pale hand, with nails too long and dull. I felt my hand tremble as the meat slopped against my palm. The black shadow, or outline, I had been looking at, or what felt like minutes, had moved. And that's when I finally saw light peek from the other side of the table. The heart in my chest dropped. Through the small hole of torn fabric, I saw Troy's feet dangling, wearing only one shoe, as the other had already fallen under the table. He was inching closer and closer. The only thing keeping him held on to the seat was the harness holding him to the chair. Dropping the meatball, I practically jumped from under the table before rushing towards Troy, unhooking the harness and carrying him into my arms. The baby began to cry as I held him close. "There's something under there. We have to leave," I practically yelled out. I didn't care if I was drawing attention from other diners. "What are you talking about? Alan, sit down," Mom said. "No, we have to leave. We have to go now," I said. Dad's face hadn't changed. He wasn't even reacting to a thing I was saying. Meanwhile, Claire was at my side as she cooed to calm Troy. Mom was trying to get a hold of the situation, but as she stood, the table began to shake, while Dad sat on his own, unmoving in his seat. Every unfinished food on the table began to topple to the floor as Mom backed against the wall, holding her purse. The waitress came back while the table shook violently, and she sighed. "I'm afraid you'll be asked to leave. We've been receiving some complaints about the commotion from your table," she said as I rushed past her, with Claire following behind. Mom dragged Dad as we all rushed out of the restaurant and into the elevator. I watched as the waitress and maitre d' stood just outside by the glowing sign, Oragos, before the elevator door ultimately closed the barrier between our family and the restaurant. What was... Claire muttered, but her words barely made it out as she, too, could barely process what had happened. We waited in the lobby where Mom demanded that the receptionist let her use the phones. Shortly, Granddad came by taxi. Mom told Gran that Dad couldn't drive, that he had too much to drink in the restaurant, to which he scolded him on the hotel lobby's couch for being irresponsible. But Dad barely listened. He just stared at the floor before Mom gave him the ticket from Dad's suit jacket to get the car from the chauffeurs. During the ride, Dad was shoved to the back seat while Mom sat on the passenger seat, and the three of us children were in our usual spots. Claire and Troy had fallen asleep while Mom spoke to Gran about what happened in the restaurant. Gran only listened as he drove, while my eyes trailed to Troy's shoeless foot. I lay my head on him gently, thankful that my baby brother was safe from whatever it was under that table. Though it felt like the storm had passed, I could still feel the lingering stare, the feeling of eyes glaring towards me, at the back of my head, and on the skin of my nape. As weeks and months had gone by since that day, Dad became an alcoholic. After work, he would come home to drink more than 3 glasses of wine. I noticed the strain in Mom and Dad's relationship. They no longer greeted each other with kisses before and after work. Mom would sometimes sleep in Claire's room, and this became the new normal for us, even if it never truly felt normal beneath the underlying feeling none of us could address. It had been years since that faithful dinner. Dad had passed from alcohol poisoning alone after I graduated college. Mom and Dad were already divorced by heart years before he passed, taking us with her to live with Granddad. Claire, Troy, and Mom still lived together in Manchester, while I had to move to London for work. Although many years had passed, and sometimes I do find myself thinking it was all just in my imagination, that maybe I really did make up whatever was hiding under the table. But whether it was real or not, I still found myself checking and peeking beneath other tables from time to time, with a lingering thought that perhaps the vacant seats we ignore were already taken to begin with. I slowly paced back and forth through the upper apartment of the entire home we were renting from an unsavory landlord. Despite his searching for answers to his life's problems at the bottom of a bottle, he cobbled together a 2-story home which gave safe harbor to my quaint family. My daughter, Rose, was finally fast asleep, gripping my loose white t-shirt. I sighed quietly with relief, as this was not the first night we had trouble putting her down for extended sleep. Rose had just hit the milestone of 7 months old. By now she was able to sleep mostly through the night, providing much-needed sleep for myself and her mother by not requiring feeding every 2 hours. For the first few days as a 7-month-old, she was as precious as could be, wistfully snoring away the moonlit hours, with no crying or fussing, allowing some hard-earned rest to her parents. While I could function for 5 hours minimum, my wife struggled more with the lack of sleep. I did right by my wife, offering endless support. It was the least I could do after she pushed our 8-pound, 7-ounce miracle free from her gutty works. It was an interesting time being a parent. I couldn't help but smile as I sat on our sectional couch in the living room, finally allowing my eyes to close for the night. My daughter safely deposited into her crib. No sooner did I relax, did a cacophonous wailing echo throughout our apartment. Bolting upright, I quickly strode into my daughter's room, opening the door quietly as I possibly could to minimize any distress the poor child was dealing with. Despite the incessant wailing, Rose calmly slept. Her mouth did not move, nor did she have any expression of pain across her cherub face. She looked warm, comfortable, and altogether unbothered by the situation. I rested my hand upon her crib that I built myself, staring at her muffled movements in the darkness of her room. As my sleepy parent brain adjusted, I could still hear the crying, though it was coming from another part of the upstairs floor. I crept around slowly, as my wife was still fast asleep in bed, only to find our black cat, Felony, wide awake and sitting at the sliding glass door to our back deck. Her tail twitched, and brushed the cold linoleum as her ears perked up at the increasingly distressing wailing. It sounded just like Rose on her worst day, if she absolutely wasn't having it. Walking up to Felony, I scratched her backside. She calmly turned her emerald eyes toward my face and let out a quiet meow, as if whispering to me not to disturb whatever was making that terrible racket. Sitting on the cold linoleum floor, staring out at the night sky offered me some perspective. Though the crying was worse from this part of the house, it appeared as though it was coming from below our deck. I checked my smartwatch. The ruddy cheeks and baggy eyes of mine formed a strange reflection overlapping with Mickey Mouse's whimsical, eternal smile from the 60s. The digital clock read 4:08 a.m. I opened the glass door to the back porch and stepped outside, with Felony in tow. "Call Clyde," I whispered into my smartwatch. The silent vibrato buzzed in the quiet dawn of the not-yet morning. "Mikey," the voice responded, awake, as I thought he would be. "Hey, I just put Rose down. Do you think you can—" "I'm so sorry, son. I gotta get better at this." His quick apology assured my suspicions. Clyde, my wife's father, had been living below us for the better part of a decade, helping our small family grow, while also subsidizing the cost of rent to the 2-story thing our landlord called a house. The old-timer was good for money, and loved Rose, as she was the first legitimate grandchild he was ever able to hold in his arms. Clyde had a proclivity for all kinds of action and horror movies, habitually watching them at a volume wholly reserved for AC/DC concerts. Aside from that one quirk, he was a stellar father-in-law, and did right by us. "Thanks, man. I'll get you a coffee tomorrow." "Appreciate it, kiddo. Welcome to raising children." "How am I doing so far?" I asked, knowing he'd be straight with me. "Better than most. I'll let you get some rest." With that, he disconnected the call. I sighed and went back into the house. The caterwauling had stopped, and Felony was uninterested in the sliding glass door. Her attention was now fixated on the rustling of the shrubs I couldn't be bothered to maintain on a regular basis. A terrible smell emanated from them, likely a skunk, though I had never smelled one so foul. I gave Felony some treats, partly as a reward for helping me solve the mystery of the wailing baby, and partly to lure her back in from the impending skunk attack. I then shut the door, got comfortable on our sectional couch, and fell fast asleep. 4 hours later, with coffee in hand, I knocked on the lower door to our house. Clyde groggily opened the door and scratched the 2 caterpillars on his face he called eyebrows. "Here." He swiped at his mug, but I pulled back, letting him suffer for a moment. "I don't want to be a bother, but the headphones we gave you last Christmas, how come you don't use those?" I then handed him his coffee, which he graciously accepted. "They aren't loud enough." He took a swig on the morning brown and waggled an eyebrow. "I mean, well, they broke." "How did they break?" The cost wasn't the issue. We could easily get him another pair, but it was upsetting that a man so good with older technology could scarcely keep a pair of analog headphones in good condition. Tried to turn them to max volume with that little wheel doohickey. It snapped and broke the volume control. I can't get any sound in them anymore. "Sorry." He looked downcast. I suddenly felt as if I had kicked a small puppy. I relented. "Well, alright, man. Just no more late-night horror movies anymore. That wailing was terrible." I paused when he furrowed his brow in confusion. "What?" "Mikey, I was watching Casablanca." "Good one." I wasn't a fan of the classics, but there was no way in hell a crying baby was in Casablanca. No, seriously, look. Kyle beckoned me into his neatly kept apartment. He had an expansive collection of physical movies and multiple combination DVD and Blu-ray players. The prize of his collection was a vintage Sony SL8000 Betamax player. It rarely saw use, but sat atop a pedestal, closely among the VHS devices that absolutely dominated the market at the time. On his coffee table, with his Marlboro pack of cigarettes and a drained glass of bourbon, still sitting next to a mostly full bottle, was the VHS copy of Casablanca. The tape that rested in the sleeve had been inserted into the fourth most available VCR closest to one of his old tube television sets that he utilized for the experience. Refresh my memory. Do any babies cry in that movie? Maybe I was wrong. Maybe when Humphrey Bogart said, "Here's looking at you, kid," it could have been possible that his delivery, although perfect, would have upset a baby nearby. Mikey, you're a new parent. This is the first time you and Angela have ever done something like this. Look, go to work. I'm off today so I can take Angie and Rosie out for some dinner, and you can catch up on some sleep when you get home. I nodded along to his prattling. I knew what I heard last night. I didn't think it was some fluke. Even Felony heard something. I was unfamiliar with what kinds of noises a skunk could make, but it certainly wouldn't be crying. I figured Clyde was right. I just wanted to be a good dad. The opportunity of fatherhood was something that had happened once before, but was ripped away from me. Yeah, okay. You're right. Thanks. We're family. You're a good dad. Even the best of dads need a break now and again. Clyde clapped me on the shoulder, and I left for work. I couldn't focus a lot on my tasks that day. The mundane office job I had was better than most. Free coffee, a gym across the hall, lots of downtime between calls on the weekends. Something kept digging at me. Clyde called me a good dad, which was kind, but I'm sure he wouldn't if he knew some of the earlier choices I made in life. I was sweet on his Angela. The anatomy of our love blossomed when I first met her at church. Angie and I had been in love for a few years, and I took it slow. But before Angie, there was Veronica. She was the first woman I had married. It was a different love than Angie. Angie was safe, and she had a good work ethic. She wasn't about taking risks, nor was she unpleasant to be around. She had a beautiful smile and was traditional in all aspects of homekeeping. I had to fight her just to do chores around the house. But Veronica, she was something else entirely. Veronica oozed freedom. She was an untamed, mythical dragon forever soaring among the clouds. This woman could turn any mundane encounter into an adventure. She lived fast and hard, and loved just as equally. When I had proposed to her all those years ago, I was sure she'd laugh in my face, but she surprised me. Okay, lover boy, make me yours. She was the Mary Jane to my Peter Parker. Everything she did was crazy, and I was just happy to be along for the ride. She was full of beautiful life and vim until she got pregnant. Veronica changed completely. Around her friends, she was still this legend among legends, but she slowly turned insular. No longer did she feel like going out, or doing the fun things we did. She wasn't about drinking, or drugs, or partying that way, but you can be sure she would be the first at the front of the concert venue, dancing like crazy to whatever songs were on the playlist. At 20 weeks, when we found out it was going to be a girl, Veronica snapped. She practically shoved her denim skirt back down and pushed the ultrasound tech to the ground. I hastily apologized while I chased after my then pregnant wife. She got in the driver's seat of our Mustang and glared daggers at me as I got in. I can't do girls, Mikey. Nuh-uh. No way. She was upset, and now had been venting, driving erratically across the back roads that wove through the dense forest, which would take us back home. Her eyes were tear-stained, and she would constantly take her hand off the wheel to rub away the rogue tears with the heel of her palm. Though I hated it, She still smoked small puffs of cigarettes, but when she was livid, the long drag of nicotine was the only master that could tame her foul temper. Veronica would only let go of the wheel once, to fetch a Belmont from within her purse, annihilating the dart much like Dracula wished he could. Why not? I thought you'd be thrilled. You'd make the coolest mom I'd ever know. The compliment was lost on her. I held on to the whoa handle in the passenger seat, regretting not pulling her out of the driver's seat before we began this cursed voyage. No way. My mom was a see you next Tuesday. She treated me like crap, like I was nothing. Tears streamed down her face. That doesn't mean you'd treat our little girl like that. It's a blessing, babe. How good will it feel to be an even better mother than your mom? I never would get anything further from Veronica, as it was destined a tree would fall in our path. As her one hand was free wiping away her tears, she overcompensated with the other, lurching the car over the cliff down into the forest below. I don't remember much of what happened during the rolling of our car, but I remember being thrown quite a distance. Checking myself, I found wounds, but I could still stand, though my locomotion was poor. Feeling around the vital areas, I only found blood when touching the back of my head. When I broke from the delirium, what I saw would be etched into my memory forever. Veronica was dead. Her neck snapped and bent at an odd angle. Her eyes and mouth were permanently in a surprised expression, as the vertebrae of her spine stuck out from her neck, without breaking skin. There seemed to be an internal pooling of blood from the odd angle of her neck. The bulging nightmare gawped from broken branches at me, a Euclidean tapestry of unending horror. Though it was assuredly broken, looking like a pimple yet to pop, the swelling red liquid rose to the point that it just couldn't penetrate her skin. Something must have detached from the car, as her belly was split wide open. The morbid cesarean performed on her by what was likely car or tree shrapnel was horrific. Her lower intestine was sagged somewhat, and the umbilical cord, complete with what was still my developing daughter, rested just below on the ground. Out from the majesty of her eviscerated womb, our unborn daughter, who was still attached to the mother, quivered in the cold. I stood stock still, shocked at the carnage that lay before me. I could only stare at the underdeveloped infant that was my unnamed daughter as it struggled to survive. Overcome by the accident and bleeding from my head, I didn't know what to do. The poor child, not yet made for this earth, expired, its little lungs unable to suck air or cry. The horrible noise it made as it took its last breaths on this plane of existence were mucus-filled cries, not loud enough to be anything considered human, but they would haunt me to this day. All the time, all I could do was weep. I took the discarded remains of our child and placed it further ahead in the woods, hastily burying it with leaves and twigs. Her glassy eyes looked at me from beyond the veil. I don't know if it was shame on that small face that glared at me, or if it was upset at its circumstance. It was the best I could do at the time. I later lied to the paramedics who arrived on scene upon me calling for assistance, and said I had been out for some time. I made a great effort to hide my tracks leading to our unnamed baby's grave. I didn't want to ever relive the memory of the alien creature of my wife's insides, warbling as it died. The guilt would still bubble over sometimes as I held Rose tight to my chest. I lamented the life unlived from my first child, the one that would never be. Mikey, you okay? Snapping out of my haze, far from the hellish forest, the buzzing lights of the call center centered me. I turned to see one of the other leaders on duty, waving a hand in my face. Getting enough sleep there, bud? Yeah, sorry. Parenthood is tough. This is you in 3 weeks, Michelle. Though I figure since you're growing the child, you'll probably be more tired. She smiled and rubbed her belly to my response. Yeah, I start my maternity leave tomorrow. I'm excited. Rick keeps asking how you've been doing, and I tell him you look tired each and every day. He said he's going to take some paternal leave to help me for the first little bit. I advocate for that. I would take more if I could, to be honest. Tell him to take 2 months, not 1. I will, thanks. Hey, it's not super busy. I can cover for you if you want to go home. She didn't have to ask me twice. I clocked out from my desk and gave her a hug. She waved as I raced home to go to bed. The drive home was 4 minutes and 8 seconds. I was still groggy by the time I climbed the stairs and unlocked the door. Angie was still home, and Rose was in good spirits. I mumbled to her one word, sleep, and passed out on the couch. I could hear Rose babbling happily in the ether of my dreams. Eventually I heard the front door open and then close. The smell of pizza woke me out of my coma. I found a note on the box. Triple cheese, just as you like it. We're out for dinner. My dad said you needed a night off, and Rose needs to learn about restaurants. Plus I'm excited for the kids under 3 eat free deal. We'll be home later. Love, Angie. The first bite of the slightly cold but still incredibly greasy pizza uplifted my spirits. I cried a single tear of joy that my creature comforts were still looked after by my wife. Angie was certainly a lover, more true than the sun. Gifted by Christ himself. My father once told me that marriage is split 60-40. The trick of the split is that both halves of the partnership were always trying to be the 60 in that split. The bliss I felt did not last long as Felony suddenly darted towards the back of the apartment and sat stock still at Rose's bedroom door. I heard a muffled cry from her bedroom. My heart leapt into my chest. I reread the note Angie had left me. Rose needs to learn about restaurants. Clearly Rose wasn't here. This certainly wasn't a restaurant. What was making that god-awful noise? I sent Angie a text. Rose is with you, right? It was a stupid question, obviously, but I had to be sure. I didn't get a response right away, so I slowly began the long walk to the back room. Every crease in the floorboards and creak from my weight caused me great unease. What was happening? What am I walking into? Why is it upset? What is it? More questions raced through my mind as I slowly opened the door to the bedroom. I didn't turn on the light. The only ambient lighting that shone through the curtains was the setting sun. The crying continued, though it wasn't as loud as it was before. Felony suddenly stood up, her hackles raised as she made a low hiss, not wanting to step a single one of her paws into the room. It's okay, girl. Shh, I'll be okay. I didn't truly know if I would be. Felony stood her ground, but walked no further. The dread of stepping closer to whatever was making the noise made my heart hammer loudly in my chest. As I took a single step into the room, my phone vibrated. The crying continued, this time louder. Slowly, I read the message, now horrified at what I might find. Rose is here with me and my dad. Attached was a picture of my beautiful daughter with spaghetti sauce on her porcelain features. I looked into the crib, which had a lumpy figure moving within the blanket. I tried to rationalize what it was that was wailing so maliciously. An odd, humorless thought of a vengeful skunk permeated my brain. Taking a breath, removing the blanket, I fell back screaming in sheer terror. Veronica's baby, my other daughter, had found its way to me. The umbilical cord clung to the child and its stout features. Its skin, her skin, was mottled and red, though she would have been 20 weeks old at the time. Whatever epidermis that would have been forming gave a sinewy appearance. Was battered by an unkempt forest floor. Dried leaves and mud were spattered on the creature. It had 2 overlarge glassy eyes that had a yellowed appearance in the sclera. She lacked a nose, but instead had a pushed-in slit and cleft palate where the nose should be. The impossible horror of her mouth had 2 sets of sharpened teeth on the top and bottom, and the mouth opened at a grimace that would be immaterial for a regular baby. The shape of the horror could almost be described as avian. This undulating creature from my personal hell climbed over the edge and lowered itself to the floor. I scrambled back towards the doorway, but hit the corner of the door frame, hurting myself in the process. With every movement it made, a feeble step, or it attempting to stand then falling on unformed legs, with no joints to support it, an ungodly squelching noise came with it. It hoisted itself up on its 2 legs and then fell forward clumsily on its talons. With every failed attempt to stand and walk, it shrieked in agony as it inched ever closer to me. I could see a prehensile tongue flick out, much like a crawling lizard, wafting through the air, trying to determine where I was. The terrible howl continued, Felony raising her own into the fray. The orchestra of madness reached its zenith when courage finally found me. I flicked on the bedroom light. Gone was the murky dimness, the room now bathed in a comforting light. The monstrosity, my unborn child, that terrible thing, was no longer there. Any viscera it had left in both the bassinet or the floor of Rose's room was gone. Felony and I both were confused, and still rattled from the experience. You saw that too, girl? The emerald green eyes of my cat gave me a knowing look. My phone was vibrating. 6 missed calls from Angie. What was perhaps only a minute was in actuality half an hour. I immediately called her back as I searched Rose's room for the maleficence that lingered within it. Michael, are you okay? She was stern, using her motherly voice. Angie only ever called me Michael when she was with Rose. A little rattled. I got some sleep but had a terrible nightmare. You don't sound so good. Pizza was a bad call? No, hun, pizza is great. Listen. I could hear movement in the living room. I lurched my body out and could see Felony playing with one of her toys. Her temperament was solid, so I felt safe for the moment. I have to go for a bit of a drive. I gotta go up north about an hour to the other office for IT shenanigans. Since I left early, they wanted me to head over and check on some things with the new employees. It was a crappy lie, but I needed something. This late at night? My wife saw through it immediately. Yeah, it's because I left early that they're making me do it. The other team leads that could be available don't have access to a car. I'm the only one that does. I sucked at lying. Well, alright then. Hey, save some pizza for Rose. I want to give her a small bite to see what she thinks. I only had a single slice before falling back asleep. There's plenty left. Okay, say bye to Daddy, Rosie. Angie put the phone up to Rose on speaker. I could hear the beautiful babbling of my living daughter. I wept, as only a father could. I could see Rose for who she was now, and imagined who she would be in the future. I didn't know if I would see it after tonight. Bye, honey. Daddy will be home late tonight. Be good for your mom. We said our goodbyes, and I silently prayed for Rose. I couldn't let this thing near her. Something had to be done. I cursed the weather as it grew tumultuous on the drive toward the unborn child's resting place. The rainfall began no sooner than I left my apartment. I said a possible final goodbye to Felony and left a note for Angela. I admitted everything, told her about Veronica, of who she knew, but also the unborn daughter, of whom I buried hastily, that she did not know about. The image still vexed me, the unborn girl who was never meant to be, though I didn't hear her cries as I drove. The thunder, crash, and lightning gave all the pageantry of her misery. I couldn't be certain that my plan would work, though I had to try. In my hasty preparation, on my way to the end of the beginning, I searched the internet for curses, any sort of malignant power, anything related to harm done to children. Aside from the biblical threat from Jesus Christ himself, warning me of the fate of gnashing teeth and great weeping I would receive for my transgressions, I found a single hit. Peroniak. The word was Slavic in origin and belonged to a subset of Scandinavian folklore that related to the mistreatment of unborn children. I didn't know what she was, but she certainly had been mistreated all those years ago. Of the few stories perpetuated from any folk stories, or video games that strung similar chords, the end result to break the curse was the same: make it right. I would give her a proper burial, hopefully appeasing her. Eventually I reached the same hairpin turn, which once had a fallen tree, though it was a few years since our crash. I could still see the area of the forest the Mustang had ruined. There was an overgrowth, but nothing I couldn't navigate. I had a flashlight clipped to my high-visibility overcoat, as well as reflective tape to help mark my passageway back to my car. Before I could make my way down the precarious embankment toward my destination, a horrible screech of tires and crash of metal interrupted any thoughts I had. Though I believe I had pulled over far enough, the rain caused visibility to be poor, and as such a tractor trailer slammed into my car. The resulting aftershock launched me over the guardrail, and I tumbled headfirst into a thicket of darkness. A familiar sensation overtook me as I fell. I could see the past as it happened. I felt all the rules of the Mustang I was once in match this future that I had yet to experience. I could see Veronica, panicking in the car, holding on to her belly. Despite all things I had believed, it relieved me to see her in her last moments, show love to the child we could have had. I felt my body strike something with a wet thud and I passed out. I woke an unknown amount of time later. The rain was still falling, though not as harshly. I sucked wind and checked my body for injuries. My ankle was twisted completely around. The pain was indescribable, like 1,000 tiny knives all cut it at once. From every angle, I checked my flashlight, relieved to see it still worked. Through the murky bramble of wet and autumn leaves, I was shocked to see the site of our crash. I wasn't sure if I should thank God or curse him. I stood weakly, looking for a branch to help support my weight. Luckily, there were thick enough sticks. I could cobble together a makeshift crutch, hobbling my way to where I had buried her, or at least where I thought I had buried her. I could see a disturbance in the ground. It had been years, but I was prepared in the event wildlife had got to her. Digging up the hastily dug grave I once created for her, I found small lumps of viscera, which I assumed to be remnants of my little girl. I cried, thinking of Rose. What a fate that could have been hers. Would I bury her like this too? How could I have been so uncaring? The task at hand, with pain and blood slowly ebbing from my wounded ankle, I resolved to make things right. I took whatever discarded rotted lumps of meat that were within the hole and wrapped them from a piece of my garment. I reburied them and used sticks to mark the gravesite. I prayed the Lord's Prayer, weeping through the verses. My breathing had become ragged. I removed the flashlight from my coat and re-examined myself. I could feel a piercing pain in my abdomen. As the rain still fell, it was hard to see what was wrong, but I wasn't sure I would have much more time to do what needed to be done. I finished the grave, scrawling her name into the cross of sticks. My ruined fingernails and broken body finally sighed as I finished with her name, Anna. My work was completed. I leaned back against the closest tree to the grave. Terror overcame me again as the same putrescent creature in Rose's bed crawled from just beyond the gloom in the forest. It was still frightfully deformed and repulsive to look at. The rain pinging against its broken body made it shudder. For the first time since I laid eyes upon the creature, I felt pity. What sort of father could leave his daughter alone in such a condition? I swallowed, tears welling up in my eyes. Anna, come here. Come sit with Daddy. If it could be called a smile, the multiple rows of teeth all at once twisted into a childlike grin. It didn't hurry toward me, but crawled with a hastened speed. The smell of it was unbearable. The rotted flesh of a carcass mixed with spoiled meat. I laughed mirthlessly, knowing now for certain what had made the rustling in the shrub those few nights ago. The prehensile tongue came out and licked one of the glassy yellow eyes, bulging from its horrible face. The crying began to waver. It was replaced with a strange cooing noise emerging from the mounts. No, from Anna. No longer was I plagued by its caterwauling. My heart felt at ease and my body less heavy. I did you wrong, Anna, but no more. I've marked where I left you and I've named you. I will always love you, just as much as Rose. I did this for her, and for you. I wasn't sure if she could understand me, but the unsettling fetal anomaly looked and listened to what I had to say. If it could comprehend me, I hoped that my words reached it. I felt as though I was forgiven. The mottled burden, my unborn daughter Anna, closed its murky eyes and began to snore, near the wound in my abdomen. I'm sorry, was the last thing I said. I stroked her coarse skin atop her head. Soon everything went dark, and I fell away into the embrace of nothingness. They found me a day later, half-starved with severe blood loss. This was due to the letter I left my wife. I don't recall many questions, though I was in no condition to answer any of them. I believe one of the responding EMTs asked me, "Who's Anna?" I just laughed. Couldn't he see? I was later committed, as I felt I was thoroughly unwell. It was mostly my choice, which Angie and Clyde respected. I told them about what I had experienced. They didn't believe me. Not many did. They still visited me regularly, and Angie remarried after a few years. Rose grew into a fine young woman, and she still called me Dad. I told her to be mindful of her mother and listen to her stepfather. Rose would tell me all about her school, her grades, boys she liked. It was a sense of normalcy, though nothing could ever truly be normal again. Her sister was often upset that I never introduced her, but I told her time and time again, Rose wasn't ready yet. Clyde would visit from time to time. He looked at me as though I was a caged animal. Despite his wariness, Clyde listened to what I had to say and believed me when I told him about Anna. He asked me what Anna looked like. I had attempted to draw her once, from my memory, foggy as it was. Every time I put pen to paper, the image wouldn't look quite right. The doctors who had approved my drawings deemed me unfit for re-entry. I soon stopped trying to explain what I could see, or who was there if only to be left alone to my own devices. But Anna was with me. Her many rows of teeth and mottled skin, her beautiful glassy eyes and prehensile tongue, which would affectionately bathe me in kisses whenever I returned to my cot. In the room I was allowed. She was a good girl, and I was glad that I had her. Her angelic wings would spread out and cover us while we napped together. I loved her, and rocked her to sleep nightly, ensuring she never cried again. My precious daughter, my little angel, Anna. I still can't explain what happened that night. This happened when I was around 12 years old, and it's something I've never been able to explain. Even now, I can remember it as clearly as if it happened yesterday. Every now and then, I find myself replaying that night in my head, trying to make sense of it, but I never can. For years, I've been telling myself to write this down, so here it is. My parents owned a restaurant, which meant they worked late most evenings. Because of that, my older brother and I would spend hours outside with the other kids who lived in the neighborhood. We'd play football, hide and seek, ride our bikes, and explore the area until our parents finished work. My brother, I'll call him Tom, always took me everywhere with him, so although I was younger, I spent most of my time with his friends. One thing about our neighborhood was that you could always tell when someone was home. At night, the lights would shine through the blinds, and you'd often see the flicker of a television. It was just one of those places where everyone knew everyone. That becomes important later. One of Tom's friends, I'll call him Richard, was fascinated with spiritism. At least, that's what he called it. He was always talking about strange games like the compass game and other rituals that kids somehow got into. He claimed that if you followed the rules correctly, you could communicate with spirits or even see deceased relatives. I never really believed any of it. I was only 12. And most of the conversations happened between Richard and my brother while I quietly listened nearby. Then one night, everything changed. I remember it was dark, and we were standing near a row of parked cars where we usually hung around. Richard looked completely different from his normal self. He was crying. I'd never seen him cry before. My brother walked over to him and asked, "What's wrong?" Richard looked terrified. "This is driving me crazy," he said. "I'm really scared. I've been playing those stupid games, and strange things have started happening." He pointed towards the house of an elderly man who lived nearby. I'll call him Bart. Bart had recently passed away. Richard explained that ever since Bart died, he'd noticed something that didn't make sense. During the day, the house looked exactly as you'd expect. Empty, but at night the lights would come on, and you could see what looked like a television flickering through the half-closed blinds. As he pointed, my brother and I looked over. Sure enough, the lights were on. From where we were standing, we could clearly see light coming through the windows. There was also the unmistakable flickering glow that looked exactly like a television playing inside. Then Richard quietly said something that made my stomach drop. "Bart died last week." My brother and I just stood there staring at the house. Trying to think logically, my brother finally said, "If Bart's dead and nobody lives there anymore, someone must have broken in. We should call the police." Richard was shaking. I'd never seen him like that before. He'd always been the toughest kid in the neighborhood. He'd grown up in a rough area and wasn't the type of person who scared easily. Around that time, another neighbor arrived in his car. He was older than us, probably somewhere in his 20s or 30s. As soon as he saw Richard, he knew something wasn't right. After hearing what he'd seen, he called the police. We waited for what felt like an hour or two before a police car finally arrived. Richard explained everything to the officers. After explaining, they decided to enter the house in case someone had broken in. They used a tool to unlock the front door and disappeared inside. We stood there waiting. A few minutes later, the officers came back outside. One of them told us there was nobody inside. No lights, no television, nothing. I remember feeling completely confused. Then one of the officers said something I'll never forget. He told us they'd checked the electrical supply, and the main fuse had actually been removed by the electricity company. From what I later learned, that's something that can happen when a property has no active electricity amount. The house shouldn't have had any power. It was impossible. Then something happened that's always stayed with me. An elderly woman suddenly appeared. I don't remember seeing her walk towards us. I don't remember where she came from. She simply appeared. She looked directly at me, my brother, and Richard. Then she calmly said each of our names before saying, "Don't worry, I'm taking care of this house." That's the last thing I remember. Everything after that is blank. I don't remember going home. I don't remember speaking to the police again. I don't remember anyone explaining what had happened. It's as if that part of the night was erased. Even now, all these years later, I still think about it. Who was that woman? How did she know our names? How did we all see lights and what looked like a television in a house that didn't even have electricity? I carried on playing in that neighborhood for years afterwards. Eventually, another family moved into Bart's house, and nobody ever mentioned that night again. But I never forgot it. Every so often I still find myself replaying those moments in my head. The light, the empty house, and the old woman who has seemed to appear from nowhere.
Psychological horror will always be towards the top of my list of the most terrifying stories out there. Tonight's video will have you thinking, that much can be said for sure. From tales of late night drives to demons tormenting one's mind, and much more. Also, my good friend Somber Reads will be reading story 2 in tonight's lineup. If any of you enjoy his narration, be sure to check out his channel. We recently did a collab on his channel as well, so I'll have a link to that in both the description and pinned comment. He's less than a couple hundred from 1K, so let's see if we can help him out. A huge thank you to the writers for allowing us to narrate their stories. Their links can be found in the description. Remember, you can send in your own story to rylhstories@gmail.com. Please remember to drop a like if you enjoy, as it helps out the channel in a very real way. Subscribing if you're new is also very much appreciated. Enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. I hate driving. The only reason why I bought a car was in order to get to places more conveniently, without having to wait for buses. If you ask me what car I drive, I can't tell you more than what color it is. I had just left my parents' home, and I had a 2-hour-long car drive ahead of me. It was dark already and the highway was surprisingly crowded at the pay toll. So I checked my GPS for another route. It led me to an old road that I never took before, and looked like I could cut 20 minutes. So I decided to take it. The road itself seemed well maintained, but the problem was, there were no lights anywhere. Even with my high beams, I could barely see through the devouring darkness ahead of me. I slowed down, unsure if there were any upcoming curves or animals that could jump in front of my car. About 10 minutes into my drive, I saw a person on the side of the road. He was holding his thumb out, trying to hitch a ride. I didn't really want to let strangers inside my car, especially in an isolated place like this one. So I ignored him and moved on. I wondered what the guy was doing in the middle of nowhere hitchhiking, but I shrugged it off and continued. 10 minutes after that, I saw another person on the side of the road with his thumb out. As I passed by, I realized it was the same person. His face and clothes were dirty, but it was undoubtedly the same person. Had I somehow gone back? I'd been driving forward this whole time, and there were no turns or curves anywhere. I checked my GPS, and I seemed to be on the right track, 74 kilometers remaining. Suspicious, but convinced there was a logical explanation, I continued. 10 minutes later, there he was again. Same person, and yet different. His forehead was bloody, and his clothes ripped in places. I looked at him holding his thumb out and sped my car up. At this point, I started to panic a little. I turned on my GPS again, and it showed I still had 90 kilometers ahead until the next turn. What the hell? Another person on the road, the same person again, bloodier than last time, arm which he held out visibly fractured, with its bones sticking out. I looked away from him and continued driving. I looked at the GPS and it showed that I had 105 kilometers in front of me. What's going on here? I inhaled and exhaled deeply, telling myself there should be a gas station or something nearby. The road can't stretch on forever, right? 10 minutes had passed since running into the person on the road, and there he was again. He was bloody all over, and his clothes were ripped in various places. He had a huge scar on his forehead, and blood was running down his face. I ignored him once more, feeling his gaze on the back of my head as I passed by. I looked at the GPS. 187 kilometers until I reached my destination. I turned on the radio to have something to keep me company, from the deafening silence, and I found a talk show. It put my mind at ease a little bit, made me feel like I was not completely alone. The person on the radio talked about the news, and I tried to listen to him, focusing on the road and hoping against hope I would not run into that guy again. Now if we move on to the sports news, our boys scored an amazing... Voice stopped for a brief moment, which made me think the radio cut out, but then it continued. Don't look behind. I stared at the road, but squinted my eyes, trying to figure if I had just imagined that. Do not look behind. Whatever you do, don't look behind. My blood froze, and I suddenly got a very strong urge to look in the rearview mirror. I resisted for a few seconds, and then fell into the trap and looked. The person who was hitchhiking was on my back seat, bloodier than ever, staring at me. I screamed and swerved off the road, falling into a ditch that stopped my car completely, forcing me to slam my head on the steering wheel. It took me a moment to regain my senses, and when I did, I jerked my head toward the back seat. It was empty. I dragged myself out of my car, assessing the damage. There was no way I could get it out of the ditch. I looked around, having a sudden feeling of unease, and then pulled out my cell phone to call for help, but no matter what number I called, the line was dead. So I did the only thing I could think of. I went back to the road on foot and started walking. A few minutes into my hike, and I saw headlights coming from behind me. I put my thumb out to hitch a ride, but the car just drove past me. I continued walking, and sometime later, another set of headlights appeared in the distance. I raised my thumb again, but the car didn't slow. As it drove past me, a shocking realization hit me like a ton of bricks. It was the same car from before. It's been an hour, and the same car keeps passing by.
Okay, so I never really believed in this sort of thing. Not until a few days ago, at least. I mean, I'm one of those people, skeptical. I didn't really buy into all this stuff about ghosts, aliens, and goblins. Only thing that mattered in my life was popularity in school. But peer pressure can be a bitch. So there was this rumor going around at school. One of those creepy rumors you hear when kids go missing. Like, oh, I heard Jimmy did the boogeyman shuffle in his room in front of a mirror with squiggles. His parents only found his toe. Or some other stupid rumor. The crap kids make up. But Joey Molesky, he vanished the other night. I heard my mom saying his mom went crazy. Said she saw him in the mirror. Said he was screaming. She got taken away. People in white coats came and took her to the funny farm. Apparently, when they went into the house, they saw a rough scribbled red pen ink on the wall in Joey's room. He wrote, "Shadow Falls." Whatever that means. That's what I overheard one of the other students saying when I walked past their lunch table. I didn't take much notice of it at first, but after 2 weeks, another kid went missing. Same sort of weird situation. It's all the kids would talk about. We live in a pretty small town, so word gets around fast. Parents started to get worried. There were curfews and lock-ins put in place. After 7, it became a ghost town. But it only got weirder. The following week, 2 kids and 3 adults went missing. The trees by the woods outside of town were up in flames. People in town thought it was just some teenagers messing around. But when they got down there, well, they found Joey. What was left of him, at least. His body was burnt to a crisp. It wasn't natural either. Heard he burned up from the inside. With all this happening, I started to get nervous. Decided maybe it was time I started paying more attention to other things. I started texting other kids who heard all the gossip. Turns out, Shadow Falls was a Facebook page. Apparently, it had something to do with this spiritual tablet that had been found and translated over in 2 caves. One in Egypt hidden away. They found it 20 miles from Giza, across the Nile. And the other was found deep in the South American rainforest, in the part of a jungle only discovered recently. They say that the tablets are one piece, but that there's still a piece missing, broken into 3 parts. Well, on the Facebook page it has this ritual, and it has most of the words for the ritual, just not all of them. They say this is what the tablets translated to, some sort of curse locked away for years. So the rumor is, Joey liked these sort of spooky ancient things, thought they were funny. The others are saying how in Joey's room, they found the details for the ritual written down. He and some friends performed it, 4 of them, out in the woods. I'm guessing they thought it was funny. The ritual asked for the blood of a harmless animal, a blood sacrifice from whoever activated the ritual. Apparently it only needed to be a small amount, and an innocent soul. I got uncomfortable reading it. I thought it was best to get some sleep. Besides, I didn't really believe in all of this. Not really. Did I? I woke up the next morning and heard my mom talking to someone on the phone. Don't worry, I'm sure he'll turn up. Another one missing. I started to get an unpleasant pit in my stomach. What's going on? The curiosity won. I opened Facebook and looked at the page again. The darkness begins. The darkness consumes. The darkness lives. And the shadow falls. That was the inscription at the beginning. I don't know why, but it sent chills down my spine. So the instructions said to set out a circle of flame, 5 candles, and the ritual words were written down here. The shadow of sun, the shadow of moon. Once the shadow's begun, it will be your doom. Shadow by night, shadow by day, shadow consuming the souls of its prey. With these final words, it soon shall be free. The candles are out, so dead you will be. It's just a stupid rhyme, I told myself. It didn't even sound that scary. So why was it making me nervous? So after that, I closed the page and abandoned it. I didn't need to know anymore. As the weeks went by, the disappearances stopped. But then it was on the news. They found the 3rd tablet in the ocean. After that, the kids at school started to bring it back up again. I didn't pay much attention. I just wanted to forget it. But then there was a shadow-themed party. Everybody was going. It's like nobody took it seriously. They were going to talk about the final tablet. Everybody wanted to know if I was going. And I agreed. Damn peer pressure. The next night at the party, they decided to do the last part of the ritual. So many jokers. None of them bought it. But I had started to feel something was off again. I tried to talk them out of it, but they wouldn't listen. Give him our flesh. Give him our bones. Wake the shadow now. Release all his bonds. In the darkness he waits for a simple taste. For when he is free, dead everyone shall be. The silence was painful until the idiot started laughing. The big jock was the first to go. Darkness swelled in the room, pulsating. The walls alive with the black frenzy of shadow. A tall figure with large black claws outlined in silver and huge pointed teeth. He took the jock out first, one long clawed finger and his head cut clean off. He swallowed it whole before it even reached the ground. It was horrifying to see. The blood poured onto the floor as he dropped to his knees and landed on the floor. Everybody screamed and freaked out. The darkness was everywhere, but the figure was nowhere to be seen. I caught a glimpse of a window. "Quick, everyone follow me!" I yelled as I ran for the window, straight ahead. I was on the second floor, but at this point that didn't matter. The figure appeared in front of me, arms wide and ready to grab me. I surprised myself when I didn't stop. I ran and dived under it. It went for me with its claws but just missed. I got behind it and jumped straight through the window. The last thing I remember, I caught a view of the window as the darkness closed up the room. The others were screaming and being torn to shreds. As I was falling to the ground outside, I twisted my ankle as I landed and rolled. I ran though, and I didn't stop until I couldn't run anymore. I fell into my garden and passed out. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. I heard about the incident at the house party, but they said the house was wrecked and people were missing. No deaths, not even any signs of injuries. After that, I didn't hear anymore. It went quiet again. After all, people go missing all the time. I carried on with my life. After all, who would believe me if I told them? But I keep the lights on now. All of them, even when I'm sleeping. If I can sleep. I can't stop thinking though. I seem to get away so easily. Feels like it wanted me to escape. If you're reading this, keep your lights on.
Once, my grandfather asked me a question. Where does the darkness go when you switch the light on? Now, it was just a riddle I knew, with no answer. But it was something that would come back to me night after night because, as a child, I was terrified of the dark. I don't know whether my fear of the dark caused the experience I'm about to relate. Perhaps it did. But what happened to me when I was around 7 years old was so terrifying that even though I don't think it was objectively real, it has stayed with me my whole life. As a child, it'd always take a long time to fall asleep. This was partly because of the thing I was scared of. Every night would be the same. After the lights went out, they would begin. I would lay awake, under the bedcloths, waiting for them to start. For a while, everything would seem normal. Traffic went past. Maybe a plane would drone by. But slowly, the silence of the night would settle like snow. The night came rolling in, a black fog seeping through windows and pooling on the floor. It gathered in corners like the cobwebs of cave spiders, drifted out of the wardrobes and from under the beds. It filled the room. Maybe tonight would be different. Perhaps I could begin to relax and accept the soothing invitations of sleep. Then, suddenly I would hear them. The night noises. A little thing, a gentle tap, so quiet it was impossible to say whether it was nearby or far off in the world outside my window. But I knew it wasn't. It was the thing that made the night noises. It was coming. I tried to breathe as quietly as I was able. The blankets were gathered around and underneath me, so I could lie upon them, forming a totally enclosed cocoon. There was the snap creak of a floorboard somewhere in the dark. That was its horrible footstep on my bedroom floor. I was too scared to think now, but during the day, I wondered about what that thing was. Why did it come only in the dark? What was it about nighttime that allowed it entry to my room? There was nothing different, I reasoned. The room didn't change with the lights off. Being in the dark was the same as closing your eyes, surely. But this argument didn't convince me. Common sense didn't apply here. Darkness did make a difference, at least. It did in the skewed, unreal reality where the thing lived. This was when my grandfather's riddle came to mind. Whatever nameless other world the dark went to, that was where the thing lived. In the light, in the dimmest of light, I could see the wall, or at least where the wall should be, but now, the blackness was absolute. It could have been a void of nothingness out there. It was impossible to tell. Without light in the world, to define surfaces and solid edges, to make them real, the thing could come through. It seemed like there were no solid walls, just endless darkness, and somehow that made a connection to its realm. The darkness in the room joined up with the thing's dark void, like a droplet of water connecting to a larger puddle. So, through the oceans of night it came swimming, from that world to ours. A nightmare made strange flesh. The noise was right at the end of my bed. That meant that I must never, ever look, for the thing would now be visible against the bedroom window. I had never seen the thing that made the night noises. I didn't want to, but I knew what it looked like, all the same. If I were to glance over now, it would be there, silhouetted against the dim orange glow of the streetlights upon the curtains, its hunched form quivering, 2 eyes, lambent orbs of yellow light, with bullet-hole pupils full of hunger and hate. This one particular night seemed worse than ever before. My heart was pounding, my body so tense it hurt. Now there was the faintest of sounds, a whisper, like the noise a sea mist might make, rolling in. It was sliding somehow, all grotesquely ballitic, down the side of my bed. Could I feel that movement too? Was there the strangest change of pressure as it oozed along toward the bedhead? What was it waiting for? At any moment it could snatch the bedcloths off me, like a napkin from a plate, and leer into my staring eyes. It wanted me to sweat in my bedsheet prison. I could imagine dreadful organs of taste and scent coiling in the air above me, drinking in my fear. The whole bed began to feel as if it was spinning, like the feeling you get when you step off a roller coaster. Something like a ringing sound, so deep it could not be heard but felt, went through my whole body, and after that, nothing. Although I was not conscious, I knew later that a long time had passed. When I awoke, it was like rising up out of deep water. I looked about, not sure what I was seeing. Around me there was literally blackness. I instinctively knew, although my young mind could not fully comprehend it, that I was sensing this not with my eyes, but with my entire being. This was not just absence of light, but an absence of anything at all. There was emptiness within me too, for I felt no fear. Just dull confusion, as though I was sedated, with muted curiosity, in the way one might explore a missing tooth. When coming around from anesthetic, I began to sense that I couldn't feel my body anymore. I don't think I had a body. Gradually, I became aware that below me, I thought of it as below, although there was no way to sense direction, was something not black, but red. It seemed at once far away and close by, a rectangular red shape that was visible through some kind of break or hole in the darkness itself. It seemed wet in some way, glistening like oilskin. Then the light shifted, as though a shadow was passing over it. There was movement, and another shape, indistinct, was next to it now. Then came a sound. In any circumstances, the gut-wrenching scream would have been awful. But what drilled right into my soul was that I recognized who was screaming. My own mother, wailing and gibbering like something inhuman. At that, the red shape resolved into a familiar object. It was a bed, viewed from above. The sheets stained bright red, and on it, but mangled into the twisted bedcloths, another shape. A grisly, visceral mass that my reeling mind refused to acknowledge. I tried to scream, as my mother was, but I had no mouth to do so. But the blackness moved, and the void closed in on the red shape, like the closing of an eye, and it was gone. It was just me now. Just me and the thing that made the night noises. Alone, in the never-ending dark, forever. The sparks of utter terror. The idea of such a fate seemed to free sticky cogs in my mind. Up to that point, everything had been viewed like a nightmare, passively observing. But now, I realized. I actually was aware that this was real. This was happening. My self-awareness rushed back, and there I was, conscious and terrified in that black nothingness. But I didn't believe the awful thing I had just witnessed. Something deep down just denied it. I don't know how else to explain what I felt. All this happens in seconds, but I can, even now, recall what my mind was instinctively thinking. as though something within me had said, right, that's it, I'm taking over. There was just me in the void, or I was the void, or there was no me apart from this fizzing, angry, suddenly ultra-lucid voice dictating what I should do. I knew, with cold certainty, that the thing was coming. The thing had brought me here, pulled me through into its nowhere world. In later years, I've wondered what the thing was going to do to me. I've theorized that because I seemed to be diminishing, losing my very self, then the thing, being a creature of nothing, was absorbing me somehow. But that's just speculation. Somehow I, or my inner voice, had an idea. A method of escape. Down there, where the scarlet horror had been, was what was going to happen, would happen if I stayed here. So if that was some kind of potential reality or future, I needed to get away from it, but I couldn't simply move away if there was nothing to move in or with. Instead, I concentrated on the direction that I had designated as being above. I focused, willing the void around me, because I was the void around me, to rise, to lift me out of this nightmare. This time, it happened instantly, almost with a pop. The second I realized I had eyes again, that I could feel, they opened. They opened onto my bedroom, utterly dull and solid and wonderful. An orange cotton bedspread with tufts on it in the front of my vision. The curtains were still drawn, with gray early morning light showing through the sides. The only evidence of anything having happened at all was the sound of my heart thundering so fast, and loud, it was almost a whir. For a long while, I just lay there, looking at the undeniable reality of the familiar, sensing my own weight on the bed, the sheets on my skin, and the little prickles and twitches of my body. That was over 40 years ago. But as you can see, it's burned into my memory. I've never experienced anything like that again, and pray I never do. Barely a night goes by that I don't at least idly recall the mental image of the thing that made the night noises, or defiantly snap my eyes open, if I have the slightest fear of doing so in case it's there. It never is there, of course. But as I grow older, I do have a creeping fear. When the day comes, 40 years closer than it was then, when the whole reality that I can see and hear and touch is finally and unescapably taken away, what will I experience? Was I given a glimpse of something that will happen eventually? Happen to us all? More importantly, will that instinctive, fizzing inner voice be of help when it comes again? I work as a helicopter pilot for a search and rescue unit in Anchorage, Alaska. After a small two-seater plane had crashed in the forest, my team and I found these journal entries in a small notebook. It was stuck between the frozen fingers of a 26-year-old man who had massive injuries. I thought the crash had brought these gut-wrenching gashes upon him, until I read the horrors hidden in the notebook. Day 1. The last thing I remember was telling Jerry that we were going to die. I must have blacked out, or hit my head, because I don't remember anything between now and then. When I woke up, Jerry was dead, and I somehow miraculously survived the plunge into the barren icy wilderness. The wind feels like daggers on my face. I saw a cave about 40 feet away from the wreckage, so I grabbed my shredded backpack and hobbled on my broken ankle. After collapsing once I made it to the cave, I did an inventory check. 2 bags of beef jerky, an empty thermos, 2 changes of clothes, and my schizophrenia meds. My parka has kept me warm enough to try to nurse my ankle to where I can at least walk on it, but I won't last long out here. I woke up in the middle of the night shivering, but I knew the cold wasn't what had woken me up. I felt on edge, the same feeling you get when you're walking home late at night, and you think you saw something, only there wasn't anything to see, only the sound of the wind. Day 2. After getting around 2 solid hours of sleep, I looked for some kind of kindle I could start a fire with. Finding wood wasn't the problem. Finding wood on the snow-covered floor of the wilderness that I could carry in my condition was definitely more challenging. After an hour or so, I was able to gather my findings into a tidy little fire pit. I tried to make sparks and ignite the bundles of broken sticks, but resorted to friction heat to create an ember. My 4 years as a Boy Scout was paying off. After the fire had been burning for around an hour, I felt my stomach roar with hunger. I ate half a bag of beef jerky and decided to take a nap to make up for the lack of sleep from the night before. I snapped my eyes open as I heard a scream in the distance. I thought I was dreaming at first, but after giving it some thought, it had to have come from the forest. I couldn't put my finger on what exactly the scream sounded like. I knew it couldn't be a human, because there isn't a human within a few hundred miles of me, but it didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard before. I watched enough horror movies to know that wandering into the snowy abyss as the sun was setting was a huge mistake, and I decided that I would do my best to ignore it. It feels as if nights last significantly longer than daytime here, like 3 or 4 times as long. My perception of the time feels so wrong that trying to keep track of what time it might be is a waste. The eerie feeling of the previous night has come back. The only difference is that it doesn't go away. I started to drift off when I heard the snow crunching outside of the cave. I limped over to see if someone had noticed the wreckage and was looking for survivors. That's when I saw it. A creature that made me nauseous when I laid eyes on it. Its legs looked like long broomsticks. Its hair went down to its waist. Its arms were about the size of a human's, but its fingers were triple the size of what I would consider normal looking. I didn't see the face of the abomination that was standing before me, and I was grateful. I slowly backed away and went back into the hollow cave. I stayed up all night, sharpening a branch with a rock in case the thing wandered into the cave. Luckily, I didn't need to use it. Day 4. I've eaten all of my jerky, and used most of the pages in the notebook for my mini fire pit. Writing down my experience in this terrible place is the only thing keeping me at ease. I slept through all of the 3rd day, and thought most of the 3rd night. I was glad I didn't have another encounter with the figure I had seen the day before. I did wake up with a small cut on the side of my head near my temple, and I don't remember how it got there. I figured it was an injury from the crash that I didn't notice. I've been looking for signs of wildlife, and there's nothing other than the being I saw 2 nights ago. No tracks, no scat, no sounds, nothing. It is unnaturally empty and quiet here. Last night I woke up with the same godforsaken feeling, only I heard the footsteps walking toward me. I turned my head and there it was, coming for me. I couldn't move. I couldn't blink. I couldn't even breathe. It had me paralyzed somehow. What the hell is this thing? I saw its face. Both eyes were pure gray, almost as if it had heavy cataracts. One small hole was in place of its nose, and its neck was curved at an almost 90-degree angle. Its skin looked as if it was pruned, and had a yellow and green tint to it, almost like a scab after you have an open wound in the pool for a while. Its mouth was very small, and was placed at the top of the chin. Its long black hair covered most of its nude body, but left its face open. It stood at the cave entrance, and looked at me with dead, hazy eyes. The light from the flames of the campfire danced across his dry and cracked skin. Then, he just left. I was able to get up when the light shined into my sleepless eyes. I am terrified of nightfall. It all began with a murder-suicide. At the time, I wasn't home. If I had been at home, I'm sure that I would have been with my parents now, but I live on my own, and only know what happened from the police that were in my family's home. Walls that were once covered with childhood drawings and family pictures were now stained with the blood of my once loving parents. The forensic team occupied the kitchen, where the heinous crime took place. I watched as my parents were wheeled out in black body bags, leaving the home they built together. Police filtered through the house, trying to find any evidence of the motive. All I could do was just mentally shut down. Both my parents were gone now, and I didn't have the safety blanket of a brother or a sister to comfort me. I was an only child, so I was now even more alone. My sole comfort comes from the music I play to keep me going, but after encountering such a tragedy, my only companion in this crazy world of ours won't even help me. With the house now being foreclosed, I was forced into an apartment paid for by the state. Everything I had ever owned, now sitting in boxes in a medium-sized apartment, while I try to find order in my life. Music echoes in my head while I begin to put the apartment together. I know soon I'll have to go to the funeral, so I'll need a black suit. Thankfully, I have a friend who works in a clothing store and can get me a discount. She already is aware of the situation, and I go in for a fitting. After about an hour of finding the right suit, I pay for it and head back home. That night, I decide to look over the police report of the incident. What had happened according to the report is quite intense. My father was in the living room watching something on TV. He then left his chair, revolver in hand. He walks into the kitchen, where my mother was making dinner for when I returned from work. She had turned her head to see my father, and saw only the end of a loaded gun. She didn't get to say a word before my dad pulled the trigger. The bullet went right through her right eye, and into the wall behind her head. Blood sprayed and left a large hole. My dad then turned the gun on himself and pulled the trigger. The bullet went through the center of his head, causing not only a blood splatter and a bullet hole, but brain matter came from the hole in his head. No motive has been declared at the time of the crime. All that was known was they both died in a murder-suicide. And from my personal experience, they never fought or anything. Their marriage was perfectly fine, no fighting, so why did he kill her and then himself? That question bounces around my head as I try to sleep. A week passes, and as the day of the funeral, I get out of bed, still trying to get over what had happened. I had shed all tears possible and couldn't bring myself to even try to farther comprehend the incident. I take a shower, shave, and drive to the graveyard. The entire drive over, all I can think about is how my dad would just snap and kill her. The actual funeral is just as depressing as I imagined. My extended family showed up to say a few words through tear-filled eyes, and then silently sit down as another speaks. Finally, we get to me, and I try to say what's on my mind. Nothing comes out, and I sit back down. The rest of the service goes on, and everyone asks if I'll be okay. I moved out a few years ago, so I'm fine on the living situation, but dealing with the fact that both my parents are gone will never leave me. My family says some parting words, and they all depart. After everyone leaves, I go back to my apartment and just sit in silence. The light from my TV provides the only brightness in my darkened room. I decide to just sleep off the day, and pray work will be better. The next morning I call my boss and say I'm not feeling well.
Charlie, take all the time you need. I heard what happened. Don't worry, we'll be fine without you. Just come back when you feel better.
My boss has never been this kind, but I just go with it. I get another call from our lawyer regarding my parents' will. I say that I will meet her in an hour and go into the shower. After a quick wash, I blow dry my hair and check how far her office is from me. Since it's only 2 blocks away, I decided to walk over. After my arrival, I'm greeted by our lawyer Anna. She's only 2 years older than me and far more successful. But I never let that get to me. We go to her office and look over the distribution of my parents' belongings. The house will be up for auction for a month. If no one buys it, the house will be torn down, and with the junk my parents collected, I inherit everything and decide the fate. Great, more junk to sort through, I joke to myself. Anna and I finish up our meeting, and I walk back to my apartment. Instead of bringing everything to my flat, I decide to go through it there. I have a month before it's sold or gone, so I've got time. I make the drive to our old house, and try not to be reminded of the horrific tragedy that occurred not too long ago. Thankfully, the scene has been cleaned up, so I don't have to deal with that. I start going from room to room, seeing what can be donated or kept. After making my way through nearly every room, I have a big donate pile and a small amount of items to keep. Some old movies from our collection, books, and family photo albums. The last room left is my dad's private room. As a kid, I wasn't allowed in. Finally, I break the seal and go in. The room contains a single chair, an old TV with a built-in VCR, and a closet. I open the closet to find a series of boxes, and in those boxes are homemade videotapes. No label on the head, but there was one on the spine. In Sharpie, the words, "Hollow Hours," followed by a number. Quizzical and perplexed by this, I take the 5 boxes of tapes and the TV from my apartment. I pack up everything in my car and drop off the giveaway pile to the Goodwill. I passed on the way back to my flat. After dropping the giveaway items off, I head back home to begin my makeshift investigation of the remaining boxes from my dad's room. I park and bring up the boxes and the TV to my apartment. After hooking up the TV in my room, I open the other boxes, more tapes with the Hollow Hours label. Eventually, I realize that there are 100 tapes of this program. At this point, I just assume it's some old show. Wanting to write down my findings, I open my phone and make a note called Hollow Hours Investigation. Wanting to see what the hell this is, I begin by looking online. Surely someone else on the internet might know what this is. After a few hours of searching, no one knows what I'm talking about. Desperate for answers, I leave a few posts on various old media message boards in hopes that would yield some results. Wanting to get into the tapes, I leave the internet and put in the first tape. The tape begins with a message saying it's the end of the broadcast day. So this is some, off-air program. Interesting. I make a note on my phone of this discovery and continue the tape. The screen cuts black, and a title card reading, "Welcome to the Hollow Hours," comes on screen. The tape goes on to show some grisly images, deaths from throughout history, and security camera footage of people dying. Various means of death are presented on this video, with one really sticking with me. A man is crushed by a car, the camera focused on his head being crushed. I pause the video and run to throw up. I'm a lifelong fan of horror films, but it's more disturbing knowing it's a real person dying. No makeup or special effects. The video goes on to show more gruesome deaths, and I make notes of my findings. The tape ends with another title card. Thus concludes the Hollow Hours. Come back tomorrow. I eject the tape and keep it aside from the rest of the collection. The rest of the day, my mind is filled with questions on what this program was for, and what the endgame is for it. That night, I try to sleep after seeing hours of horrific images. After struggling, I just choose to stay up and try to find out anything more about this show. Was it some local access program that's lost to time? That seems plausible. So I looked up my old town's television station, known as Greenbell TV. No program named The Hollow Hours. Shows up on the site, not even anything that matches a description of the show. Damn it. I mumble and pace my apartment. Am I missing something? Was this program picked up at a garage sale years ago from another part of town? After doing research on when recordable videos first started, I narrowed my search window. From my digging, I placed the start of the timeline at the early 1990s. Judging from the footage found on the first tape, it seemed to be taken before my timeline is set up, but it could have been found footage from a snuff film. My curiosity gets to me, and I go back to my room to watch another tape. Well, I think I should go in order, I say, and get the second tape. I put the tape into the VCR and I'm greeted with the same message as before. Much like the first tape, horrific images and graphic deaths are displayed on my screen. Some are of families being tortured by burglars, recording the whole event. The video starts shortly before the burglar enters, and it shows the address of the house. I pause the tape and write down this new piece of evidence. After writing that down, the tape goes on, and more grisly images are burned into my head. The tape goes on, and my gaze won't leave the screen. After 7 hours, the tape ends with a "see you soon." I eject the tape, turn off the TV, and sleep to get my energy back. I'm awoken to a notification from one of the forum posts, asking about the Hollow Hours. The commentator tells me that he recalls something akin to Hollow Hours, and describes what he saw. He says it was early in the morning and many years ago, so he's unsure if it even aired. I thank him for his help, and take a shower to wash away my odor. I've been cooped up watching these tapes for almost 2 days, and I need to clean myself up. All during my shower, images from the first 2 tapes rattles through my brain. I decide to drive to the house that was broken into during the second tape. It's a bit of a drive, but I just have to know. I gather myself and begin my journey to the break-in site. After an hour of driving, I arrive at the crime scene, or rather, the house that the incident took place. I leave my car and knock on the front door. The owner asks what's going on. As a lie, I say that I'm out of gas and my phone's dead. The homeowners let me inside. I sit with them and call for assistance. In reality, I just left a voicemail for Anna. "So can I ask you a question about the history of this house?" I ask, and they look at me like I'm insane. "Yeah, there was a break-in about 30 years ago. It was big news around these parts." Anna comes to where I am to help me. Actually, she just came to see if I was okay. "Yeah, just going through my parents' belongings." She shrugged and pulled out an empty gas can. I pretend to fill up my car and drive back home. So these tapes are actually old videos. Better keep watching. I think to myself as I enter my apartment. I close the blinds in my room and put on the next tape. The familiar greeting and more violence ensued. After a few hours of merciless violence and carnage, my brain just shuts down. It's like a walking coma. All I can do is insert tape after tape. By around tape 25, I awakened from my comatose state. I took notes, although I don't recall doing so. Reading them over, I'm taken aback by the horrific acts of horror, shootings, death by cars, death by consumption, and one labeled as just the most sickening thing I've seen yet. I dare not relive whatever that was, and keep going on. Days pass, and I finally arrive at the final tape, tape 100 of the Hollow Hours. Who knows what could be on this tape? Answers to what the hell this was, or just more acts of dehumanization. Anxious, I put the tape in. Instead of the familiar "Welcome to the Hollow Hours" from the previous 99 videos, this one starts with a man. He's standing in what can only be described as a cult robe. His face was obscured by the oversized hood. He speaks to the camera about his cult. One statement sticks out to me. "I want you all to spread the violence." He lingers on this phrase for a solid 10 minutes, after which the tape ends. I sit back in my chair and let what happened wash over me. This man wants to just spread hate, and his way to do this was from some underground television show? Desperate for answers, I go back online for more help. My forum posts yield no responses, which angers me. God damn it. I scream to myself, and throw my phone down. After taking a minute to scream, I see something in the box I didn't notice before. Taped to the wall of the box is a note, written by my dad. It must have been obscured by the color of the box and the faded tape. I peeled off and opened the folded piece of paper. Scribbled on is another address. The cult. I think out loud, and put it in my phone. Another long drive, and I arrive at a dilapidated warehouse. I park my car close by in case I need to escape. A door underneath a lamp seems like the only entrance, so I walk over. One knock later, and the door is open. I take out my flashlight and slowly make my descent down the stairs. Finally arriving on stable ground, a dark red light comes into view. "Who goes there?" a voice calls out, the red light following close behind. "Sir, I wish to know more about the Hollow Hours." I respond, in hopes I can continue my investigation. The red light gets closer and closer, held by a hooded figure. "You wish to know more?" the voice asks, and I nod in response. The next thing I know, I can't see, and I'm being taken farther into the warehouse. The object obscuring my vision is removed, and I'm sat in the middle of a circle. Everyone is covered in a hood similar to the man I encountered earlier. "Welcome to the cult of the Hollow Hours," I hear from another booming voice, followed by the circle murmuring to themselves. The booming voice's owner comes into view, and the discussions from the circle cease. "Yes, sir," I say, afraid of what will happen to me. The source of the booming voice comes to me and removes his hood. He's a rather muscular man, and stands out from the other meek members of the cult. "I see. And how did you find out about this cult? Did you watch the tapes, or did someone tell you?" He asks in hushed tones to me, kneeling down to be at eye level. I swallow my heart, which has now lodged into my throat. "Okay, sir. Let me explain how I wound up here. It all began with a murder-suicide." Before June 28, 2019, I was an avid urban explorer. I would always look down back roads for abandoned houses and soon-to-be torn-down barns. I'm also a photographer by trade, so naturally, I brought my camera along with me to capture the experience. So when my grandfather invited me up to his summer lake home in the White Mountains, I was gleeful. Not because of the mountain scenery, or the private lake with multiple jet skis. No. I was giddy at the thought of being able to explore one of the most sought-after abandoned destinations, Surf Coaster. Surf Coaster was a massive abandoned water park about 2 miles from Wares Beach. The park covered about 10 square miles, and was rumored to be the urban explorer's paradise. I arrived at the nearest public parking lot, at Cumberland Farms, at around 6:40 p.m. I used my phone to see a topographical satellite view of the large abandoned parking lot of the water park. I was led down a few side streets and back roads until I saw the sign. Hidden among vines and bushes was a blue sign with yellow-tinted bulb lights surrounding it that said Surf Coaster. Next to it was a rusted and rather puny 2-foot-high gate with a faded "No Trespassing" sign. I'll pretend I didn't see that. Stepping over the obstacle, I was presented with a parking lot with a few scattered 80s-looking hatchbacks and sedans. They were rusted with their windows smashed in, and graffiti plastered all over them. The parking lot stretched about 70 feet in front of me, and then stopped to another fence. To my right, there was a wooden fence, and to my left, down a step hill, was an urban explorer's dream: water slides covered with ivy and moss, pools filled with deflated inflatable toys, and sunning chairs with towels still on them. As I started down the embankment, I stopped at what must have been the ticketing booth. Inside the ajar door was a small room consisting of a chair with a comb on it, an open cash drawer underneath the counter, and a roll of tickets behind the chair. As I stepped inside, I noticed something in the open cash drawer. It was money. Water damage money. I gently picked up a 50 and held it up to the golden hour sunlight to see the blue security strip running down the bill. It was real. Why in the world would the company leave money at their closed park? I thought to myself. Placing the bill back in the drawer, I continued down the hill. The next 2 hours were fairly standard for urban exploring. Chipping paint, dirty water, rotting wood, all except for one small detail: the towels. On most of the lounge chairs by the large pool were people's towels, as if they had just left them. I thought nothing of it and ignored it. After I had seen the last enormous moss-covered water slide, I only had one more place to go: the bathrooms. Now at this point in my adventure, the sun had already set, and a cool breeze was making the hairs on my arms stand up. As I traversed the crumbling pool deck on the hillside bathrooms, I noticed something odd: the bathroom doors. The doors were rusted steel with large locks on them. When I got there, I was right. Large rusted locks were holding the bathroom doors shut. But why the bathrooms? I wanted to explore them, but they were built into the hillside and were mostly underground. So there was only one entrance. As I looked around for a rock or some heavy object to try and dislodge the locks, I realized that the ground surrounding the bathrooms were scattered with bullet shells. They were still shiny, and using my scarce weapon knowledge, they looked to be .30 caliber rounds. My stomach turned as the park could actually be closed due to an active shooter or terrorist. Wouldn't that have been on the news? I mean, that's a big deal. I settled myself, as they could have just as easily been rounds fired by some rednecks who used the water park as their gun range. It was New Hampshire, after all. I soon found a rusted fire extinguisher and successfully knocked the men's room lock off. Inside was an assortment of more towels, swim goggles, duffel bags, and dried up sunscreen bottles. The whole room smelled like vinyl for some reason, and I could barely snap a few pics before bolting out of there. Odd that they would lock that up, but it could serve as a home for homeless people or drug dealers. I was just going to skip the women's room, assuming it would be more of the same. But then the thought hit me: what if it was something else? What if it was the same? I had to know. After retrieving the fire extinguisher from the bush I threw it into, I knocked off the second lock and opened the heavy door. A blast of air hit me. There were two things wrong with that air. One was the fact that it made me as cold as I had ever been, and that it smelled like a rotting animal. I stepped out of the way to let myself warm up for a few seconds. I saw a good photo opportunity there with both doors open, so I took it. Setting my shutter speed to capture the light just right, I was about to take the photo when through the viewfinder, I saw something that made my blood curdle. Movement from inside. There was a grayish, brownish movement coming from inside. I dropped my camera in frozen fear. The faint lighting the full moon gave was enough to reveal the creature that slowly emerged in front of me. It was crouched down to fit inside the doorway, so I could only guess it was 9 feet tall. Its face was that of a wolf, and it had teeth that jutted out of its lips. Large green deer antlers topped its head, and its fur was greasy and slimy, like that of a dog's saliva. And as I stared at it, it let out the most terrifying sound I have ever heard. Its wail was high-pitched and raspy at the same time. Adrenaline rushed through me. As I turned to run back up the cracking stairs to the hill, my feet pounded on the moist soil as I neared the parking lot. I glanced over my shoulder, and only then could I see the complete mass of the creature. It had to be at least 10 feet tall, and its strides on all fours told me that I had to run faster than I'd ever run before if I wanted to live. So I did. I ran all the way back to the main road, and all the way to the gas station, all while listening to its ear-piercing wails grow farther away. I practically dived in my car and nearly stalled it trying to peel out. I drove the 2-hour journey back to Lincoln, with my foot to the floor most of the way. Even though I'm back in civilization, I still don't feel safe, and I regret going there. I also regret dropping my camera, so if anyone wants a Canon 1DX, check the abandoned bathrooms at Surf Coaster. But beware of the Where's Beach Wendigo. Don't enter my house. Whatever you do, reader, make sure nobody enters my house once I'm gone. Don't let the sounds get to you like it got to me. There are gaps in my memory, and I shudder to think about what could have happened during those times. But this is my story. I was home one day watching Netflix when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. There had been a flash of black, a piece of the night sky that disappeared the moment I looked at it. If I didn't know better, I would have sworn I'd seen a mouth in it. If I hadn't known then what I know now, I would have fled and never returned. But then it might not have been enough. I later found a small jet black feather in the corner of the room where the flash had been. It was extraordinarily dark, to the point that it seemed to blend into itself. I had ignored it at the time, leaving it on the table in front of my couch and continuing with my movie. The feather disappeared, and that was the last I saw of it. Then came the sounds. At first it was a strange chirping, but then it was an incessant ringing, like tinnitus. I didn't notice it at first, but it quickly began breaking my attention when it would get louder. You can imagine how hard a desk job is when something is constantly making noise. But that wouldn't happen for some time. The ringing would occasionally devolve into a barely perceptible screeching noise, the sound of overworked steel grinding into the ground way off in the distance. Life continued as normal. In the first couple weeks, I could almost ignore it completely. Almost. The first night after hearing the noise was filled with pleasant dreams. It was always a sunny summer day in a public park. There was always a slight breeze, and I was always starting off by sitting under the shade of a large tree. It was always comfortable and relaxing. Children would be playing sports and families would go on walks. Songbirds would chirp nearby. The noises from the day were here too. It was always centered on a small pug that followed me around the park. I could accomplish many things in this dream world. I felt powerful. The pug would speak to me in a deep voice. It told me it was a spirit of peace at war against the noise of disruption. It gave me tasks to do in the dream world, to fend off the noise. It never occurred to me to disobey, but I wish I had done so. Maybe that would have stopped the ringing. The commands would get progressively more peculiar as time went on. One day I had to find and skin a bear for its pelt. I woke up wearing the bear skin, and it's been a very nice coat since then. Stuff began materializing around me that I didn't attain while dreaming. A hunting knife, an old micro-cassette sound recorder, a crow's feather, black as a piece of the night sky. And then came last week. 6 days ago the noises changed. It became unintelligible whispers, awful continuous mutterings. My mind became a screaming well of voices as I began to lose my sense of individuality. I went to bed that night and couldn't sleep. The talking, it was so loud. Earplugs didn't work. White noise didn't work. I was getting desperate for a means of attaining some peace. I managed to get no rest that night as I stared at the alarm clock, watching the seconds tick by. I haven't gone to work since that day. Not that I would have been able to do much in my current state. It was 3 days ago when my friends came to check on me. The conversation is a blur. I remember her comment about the house being a mess and that I look like hell. It definitely felt that way. I was mulling this over when she screamed. She was standing over a half-decayed corpse, the reeking body lying face up on a small kitchen island, shattered limbs hanging off the side, most of its skin missing. How did that get there? I don't even remember getting out of the house, so there's no way I could have been the one to do it. It became so crystal clear right then. She had planted the body there to frame me for a murder. My blood froze at the thought. How could she betray me like that, after all we had faced together? Then my thoughts paused and the voices quieted. What had we been through together? I couldn't remember how I knew her, only that she was once my friend. I don't remember what happened after that. but that I had gotten a brand new bear pelt when my memory resumed. The voices were quiet for the rest of the day. I retained my sense of self, drawing the closest to the privacy of my own thoughts as I had been since the noises began. It was the night that the voices began to make sense. They were talking to me, one of the myriad minds, some speaking to each other, some speaking to me, and some just screaming in madness. One voice came out in particular. It had a deep voice. It was the voice of the pug from my dreams. I listened to it. I didn't think anyone would have disobeyed an order from a voice so calming, so truthful. He told me what I needed to do to make the voices stop. The rest of the voices followed suit, endlessly echoing his decree. His request made me hesitate, but the pain was too much to bear. You have to understand, I didn't want to do what I did. I was so tired, and they told me it would stop. They promised me it would stop, but they lied. They told me if I would just do what they asked, it would all be over. You are in no position to judge me when you would have done the same thing. So I followed the voice's instructions. I left the house for the first time in a week, and found him wandering through the night. I don't know why they chose him. He had so much to live for, and so much left he could have done. But the noise persisted. I knew he was the target the moment a crow landed on his shoulder. All I had to do was get close while brandishing a hunting knife. When I had reached the jumping distance, I blacked out and woke up back home. Unlike last time though, the voices were no quieter, and I knew something bad had happened. I don't know what happened, but in my current clear thinking, it must have been something terrible. Why won't it stop the voices like last time? I have to make it stop. I want to sleep for the first time again. There was no summer day dream. There was only me, hunting and stabbing people over and over. I woke up tasting iron in my mouth, an acrid rotting stench in my nostrils. The voices were gone, but I knew they would be back. They would always come back. I need to put a stop to this soon. This is my last message to the world. Don't enter my house. Don't let the noises get to you. Stay away from the sound. The best defense is to hide from it. I'm pursuing the eternal silence now. I hope no noise will ever reach me there, where no action can catch up to me.